Chapter 1929. Boom! The big man vigorously slashed out with his saber, sending out a massive ray of light that seemed to be able to split apart everything as it slashed towards Bing Shuang Shuang. Bing Shuang Shuang took out an ice-long sword and swung it with all his might. A beam of sword light brought with it a bone-chilling cold as it slashed forward. The two attacks collided and turned into a gust of wind made up of saber chi and cold air. The ground cracked, and the tables and chairs nearby also shattered and were blown away. The godly spirits did not care about this and hurriedly ran out. Even though they had more people than the Ice God faction, since the Ice God Alliance had led them here, they definitely had some terrifying methods. As such, they still wanted to run. Just as they were about to rush out of the temple, a cloaked figure holding a sharp sword appeared at the door. Seeing this person, the godly spirits' faces became pale, and they felt as if they had fallen into an abyss. They never would have thought that the Pantheon Palace's Godmaster would appear here. Zhao Fu gave a cold smile as he raised his sword and sent a massive wave of power into it before vigorously slashing out. Boom! A terrifying black sword light containing terrifying power slashed towards the godly spirits who were running over. Zhao Fu had long since used his demon power to control the residents and soldiers here, so he did not have to worry about the news leaking out. Out of the 9 godly spirits, 3 had fainted and were on the ground, while the remaining 6 stood together and looked around with unsightly expressions. The 4 ice gods had surrounded them, and there was also Zhao Fu in front of them. The furious big man held his saber and yelled, "Ice God faction, you bastards! When the alliance was established, you were our leaders, but now you betrayed us and caused the deaths of my brothers. I definitely won't let you off." Bing Shuang Shuang's expression was cold as she held her icy long sword and did not reply. She felt a great deal of guilt towards her Ice God faction, but she did not feel much guilt towards the other factions. After all, the two sides could not just use each other. Zhao Fu said coldly, "All right, let's not talk about anything else. Let's not talk about anything else. Are you willing to serve me now?" The godly spirits who were surrounded looked at each other with pale faces and did not reply to Zhao Fu. Boom! A godly spirit gave off a massive aura as its body gave off intense divine light. It quickly flew upwards, wanting to break through the roof and escape. Zhao Fu snorted disdainfully and stretched out his hand. Clang, clang, clang. Chains shot out from the surroundings, giving off immense power as they quickly shot towards the godly spirit, easily binding it in the air. This caused the other gods who wanted to escape to stop immediately. Zhao Fu looked at the godly spirits and said coldly, "Do you think you can escape? My patience is limited. Do you choose to submit or resist?" A young man couldn't bear the pressure from Zhao Fu's terrifying gaze. "I choose to submit to the Pantheon Palace." The old man beside him understood the current situation and sighed. "I'm also willing to surrender." Originally, they only had 6 gods left. Now that 1 was captured and 2 were willing to submit, there were only 3 gods left. The other 2 gods thought about it and understood that they had no chance of resisting, so they also said that they were willing to submit to the Pantheon Palace. Finally, a valiant-looking big man looked at the other godly spirits with an unsightly expression. Now that all of the godly spirits were willing to submit, he was the only one left. However, even if it was just him, he was not willing to submit to the Pantheon Palace. He loudly roared and exploded out with all of his power, causing a powerful godly spirit aura to spread out like a wild gale. The big man glared at Bing Shuang Shuang and gave off a massive aura as he rushed towards Bing Shuang Shuang. He was even more furious towards Bing Shuang Shuang, this traitor. Of course, he understood that he was not a match for Zhao Fu, so he changed his target to Bing Shuang Shuang. Bing Shuang Shuang's expression did not change, and he raised his sword and exploded out with all of his power. An icy aura flame burst forth from his body, causing the surrounding temperature to plummet and a layer of frost to form on the ground. Boom! The big man sent some of his power into his large saber, causing it to give off an intense light. He vigorously slashed out, causing a massive crescent saber light to slash out towards Bing Shuang Shuang with shocking power. Xing! Bing Shuang also sent some of his power into his sword, causing it to burn with an icy aura flame. A layer of ice formed on the sword, and he slashed forwards, sending out an intense, icy sword light. Bang! The two waves of power collided, resulting in a massive explosion. A terrifying shock wave spread out, causing the ground to collapse. Bing Shuang Shuang retreated a few steps, while the big man flew backwards. It was evident that Bing Shuang Shuang was stronger than the big man. The big man crashed to the ground and coughed up a mouthful of blood. He was not willing to accept this and wanted to stand up and continue fighting with Bing Shuang Shuang. However, Zhao Fu was not interested in watching anymore. He stretched out a hand and grabbed at the air, causing a wave of demonic energy to flow out. Massive pale white tendrils stretched out from the ground and quickly wrapped around the big man. The big man vigorously struggled as he shouted furiously, "If you have the ability, let me go and fight one-on-one. I'll definitely kill you." Zhao Fu was expressionless as a massive wave of demonic energy flowed into the big man's body. The big man's struggles gradually weakened, and he was finally controlled by Zhao Fu. Following this, Zhao Fu stretched out his hand, and a wave of demonic energy flowed out. Many pale white tendrils stretched out and wrapped around a few godly spirits, and countless traces of demonic energy continuously flowed into their bodies, controlling them. Now that he had their bodies under control, Zhao Fu gave a trace of a smile. He could now carry out his other plans. Zhao Fu did not plan to control any more godly spirits. Even though there were still some godly spirits that he had not controlled, Zhao Fu did not want to go through so much trouble. If he wanted to destroy the entire Ice God Alliance, the current conditions were more than enough. Following this, Zhao Fu had the godly spirits return and wait for his orders. Zhao Fu also returned and immediately gathered his generals and gave the order to attack the Ice God Alliance. He also left some soldiers behind to defend the other two alliances. The various generals felt quite surprised because the Pantheon Alliance had only been unified for a few days, and it was time for them to stabilize the situation and strengthen their unity. The various soldiers had only just familiarized themselves with the current situation, so it was not a good time for them to go out. However, it was precisely because of this that no one expected the Pantheon Alliance to attack at a time like this. Moreover, Zhao Fu was completely confident in winning this battle, or else such a rash action would have many adverse effects. Chapter 1930. Charge! The soldiers all wore white armor and gave off terrifying auras as they rushed towards the Ice God Alliance like a white flood. Their auras were massive and shook the surroundings. After hearing about this, the three alliances fell into shock. They had never thought that the Pantheon Temple would attack so quickly. The Sun Alliance's various godly spirits discussed that they could not allow the Pantheon Temple to continue developing. After all, the Pantheon Temple was now a unified faction and not an alliance. If it devoured the Ice God Alliance, the Sun Alliance would definitely be destroyed. The various godly spirits did not want to attack, but they understood that the unified Pantheon Temple was too dangerous. Even if they did not want to attack for their own safety, they still decided to attack and stall the Pantheon Temple soldiers. The Night God Alliance hesitated as to whether or not they should attack the Pantheon Temple and stall some of the Pantheon Temple soldiers so that the Ice God Alliance could survive. They already knew that the Sun Alliance had attacked, so they were not in a rush. They decided to gather their soldiers and see how the situation changed before attacking. If the Ice God Alliance and Sun Alliance could stop the Pantheon Temple, the Night God Alliance would not need to attack. They did not want to suffer any losses, but if they could not stop the Pantheon Temple, they would attack then. The Ice God Alliance's Savage God faction, Silver Coin Spirit faction, Butterfly Spirit faction, and a few other factions panicked when they heard that the Pantheon Temple was attacking. They hurriedly told the Ice God faction and had them ally together to defend. The various factions had already heard about Zhao Fu's orders and understood the outcome of the battle. They were not afraid because they had already submitted to the Pantheon Temple, and the Ice God Alliance was destined to be destroyed by the Pantheon Temple. Even though they were not afraid, they still had to pretend to be afraid so that the other factions would not notice that something was off. However, they did not need to pretend, because most of the residents and soldiers did not know that their godly spirits had submitted to the Pantheon Temple. As such, they were still quite afraid and prayed that they would be able to defend against the terrifying Pantheon Temple. Bing Shuang led the various godly spirits and countless soldiers to the defensive walls and gave off a massive aura. The Ice God Alliance only had 100 million soldiers and 30 or so godly spirits, while the Pantheon Temple had 200 million soldiers and 40 or so godly spirits. In terms of soldiers and godly spirits, the Ice God Alliance did not have much more soldiers than the Ice God Alliance, so the Ice God Alliance was still able to defend against the Pantheon Temple. The two deities stood in the sky, exuding powerful auras that caused the weather to change. The two armies had made their preparations for battle, and their expressions were cold and gave off austere, killing intent. The air around them became heavy, making people feel very uncomfortable, oppressed, and terrified. Zhao Fu stood in the air and said with a smile, "I advise you to submit to me as soon as possible. There's no need to cause unnecessary casualties. Cut the crap. If you want to fight, let's fight. Our god of barbarism isn't afraid of you. Fight, fight, fight." Hearing the voice of the barbarian god, the burly barbarians roared in excitement. Their voices were like thunder, and they showed off their awe-inspiring might. This caused the other Ice God Alliance soldiers to feel hot-blooded, and they no longer feared the Pantheon Palace soldiers. Their gazes were resolute, and they gave off an aura of hope. A silver coin godly spirit frowned. If they had any other choice, they would not have participated in this war. Looking at the countless Pantheon Temple soldiers, it was evident that the other side had an advantage. Moreover, that mysterious Pantheon Temple god leader was personally leading this battle, so it was possible that they would lose. As such, they could not stand the god of barbarism acting so rashly. If they yelled the loudest now, they would die even more horribly in the future. The silver coin godly spirit did not want this to happen, so he said, "As long as the Pantheon Temple doesn't attack us, we're willing to obediently stay here. We can also swear that we won't attack the Pantheon Temple, and we can all live in peace. What do you think?" Zhao Fu could not help but lightly laugh. "Do you think that's possible?" The silver coin godly spirit was not surprised and said, "If you agree not to attack us, we can give you all sorts of help. We can even help you send soldiers to attack the other two alliances." A butterfly godly spirit said, "I agree with the silver coin godly spirit. As long as you don't attack us, we can agree to some of your requests." The butterfly godly spirits thought that the Ice God Alliance had been heavily injured and would not be able to fight, so they wanted to stall for time so that the Ice God Alliance could become stronger and have a showdown with the Pantheon Temple. The barbarian godly spirit said unhappily, "Why are you two so cowardly? The Ice God Alliance might not even lose, but you're already afraid of them? Don't you have the pride and dignity of a godly spirit?" Zhao Fu lightly laughed. "It seems that the Ice God Alliance isn't just decided by the three of you, right?" Hearing this, the three godly spirits came back to their senses and looked at Bing Shuang, who had not spoken yet. The Ice God Alliance was ruled by the Ice God faction, and even though the three godly spirits were more powerful, they could not compare to the Ice God faction. The Ice God faction controlled the alliance, so the three godly spirits could only represent themselves. They looked at Bing Shuang, wanting to know what decision she was going to make. Was she going to fight or make peace? Bing Shuang rolled her eyes at Zhao Fu and said, "All right, stop teasing them. Stop teasing them. Hurry up and start." These words caused the three godly spirits to feel quite startled. Seeing how close Bing Shuang seemed to be with Zhao Fu, they felt a trace of unease. Zhao Fu loudly laughed as he said, "Very good. All soldiers, listen to my orders and attack those godly spirit factions. Kill." Countless Pantheon Temple soldiers wearing white armor roared and gave off ferocious auras as they rushed towards the defensive walls. The three godly spirits did not have time to react, and they had never thought that the various factions on the defensive walls would attack them. Many factions in the Ice God Alliance had submitted to the Pantheon Temple, including the core Ice God faction. Thinking about this, the godly spirits' faces paled, and they did not hesitate as they hurriedly yelled, "Hurry and run." Now, not only did they have to face the Pantheon Temple soldiers, but they also had to face the soldiers around them. The battle had been decided from the start, and only by running would they have a chance at survival. Otherwise, they would all die here. Chapter 1931. On the other side of the battlefield, the Sun Alliance had already gathered their army and officially launched an all-out attack against the Pantheon Divine Hall. They gave off a powerful and tremendous aura, destroying everything like a ferocious flood. The three sun gods stood in the sky, giving off boundless light that shone in all directions like three suns. This time, the Pantheon Palace had mobilized more than 200 million troops to attack the Ice Goddess Alliance. Now, only 100 million troops were left to guard the Pantheon Palace. However, they had to defend against the attacks of the Sun Alliance and the Ice Goddess Alliance. 100 million soldiers divided in half was 50 million soldiers. Even though the Night God had not yet attacked, the Sun Alliance had also sent out more than 200 million soldiers. It would be difficult for Pantheon's 50 million soldiers to stop 200 million soldiers. If they attacked the Pantheon Temple, then the Pantheon Temple could only retreat and return to defend. That would be even better. The Sun Alliance could directly attack the Pantheon Palace and destroy it. Then, they could destroy the half-destroyed Ice Goddess Alliance, and finally destroy the Night Goddess Alliance. When that time came, they would be the most powerful force in this area. Thinking about that, everyone could not help but feel excited, and they smiled. No matter what the outcome of this attack was, it would be beneficial to them. The Sun Alliance's army arrived at the walls of the Pantheon Palace with a powerful aura and was about to launch an all-out attack. Suddenly, a piece of news soon arrived. The Ice Goddess Alliance had been completely defeated and was now under the control of the Pantheon Palace. They were now mobilizing their troops to defend themselves. Hearing this, the godly spirit of the Sun Alliance was dumbfounded. How could the Ice Goddess Alliance be destroyed so quickly? Even though he was already half dead, he should at least have been able to put up some resistance. However, the speed of destruction was too fast. Is the Ice Goddess Alliance a bunch of trash? How could it be destroyed just like that? Could it be that the Pantheon Temple will kneel down and surrender in fear? Let's retreat. I feel that the Pantheon Temple is too sinister and vicious. We might have fallen into their trap. This Pantheon Palace is really terrifying. I don't think the Ice Goddess Alliance would be this weak. Pantheon Palace must have done something. Their sudden all-out attack on the Ice Goddess Alliance was too sudden. I think you're right. The Pantheon Temple has never been defeated since its establishment. Everything is premeditated. Do you know who the Pantheon Temple's Divine Master is? What should we do now? The Pantheon Temple is too scary now. Now that their side had just arrived, the war on the other side had already ended. What else could they do? Pantheon soldiers had already returned to defend, so attacking Pantheon would not be of any use at all. It would only increase their losses, so they could only retreat and return to the Sun Alliance. The Night Goddess Alliance also looked shocked. They had never thought that the Ice Goddess Alliance would be so weak and be directly destroyed by Pantheon. After taking over the Ice Goddess Alliance, Pantheon was simply too terrifying and dangerous. At this moment, the Night God Alliance also understood that they could not stand by idly and allow Pantheon to continue developing. Otherwise, they would definitely be destroyed by Pantheon. Subsequently, they also received detailed information. It turned out that a large group of deities in the Ice Goddess Alliance had already surrendered to the Pantheon Palace, which was why the Ice Goddess Alliance had collapsed so quickly. However, why did so many gods quietly surrender to Pantheon? Moreover, the gods who were originally part of the Pantheon Alliance also voluntarily surrendered to Pantheon without any request. Some of the gods before them also did the same. This was a bit strange. Why would these gods willingly submit to the Pantheon Temple? Was it because the Pantheon Temple was friendly and righteous? No one believed this. Pantheon Temple God leader must have had some power that made these gods obediently submit to him. Thinking of this, many of the gods thought that Pantheon Temple God leader was too strange and scary. They had been investigating Zhao Fu's identity for a long time, but they had not found anything. Some people guessed that he was someone from the center of God area. His identity was very noble, which made people even more afraid of him. His eyes turned back to the Pantheon battlefield. Zhao Fu sent most of his troops back to reinforce the Ice Goddess Alliance. He left a small number of people there to control the Ice Goddess Alliance. After this battle, Pantheon had won the battle with very few losses. The gods and soldiers who did not surrender to Pantheon were either killed or captured. They were no longer in danger. Zhao Fu sat on the throne of the Ice Goddess Alliance. That was a position that only the leader of the Ice Goddess Alliance could sit on. Many gods and generals were kneeling before him. They were all people who were willing to submit to Pantheon, including the Dollar God Spirit faction and the Butterfly God Spirit faction. As for the Barbarian God faction, they were all killed by Zhao Fu. The leader of the Barbarian God faction had been beheaded by Zhao Fu, and his god personality had been dug out. This was because they had resisted too intensely. So Zhao Fu could only kill them all. This forced the remaining two factions to immediately submit in fear. Now that the large factions had submitted, the smaller factions did not hesitate to follow suit, which was why the battle had ended so quickly. Zhao Fu's eyes lit up as he looked at Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu gave a trace of a smile as he said, "All of you rise." Hearing this, the deities and generals heaved a sigh of relief, stood up, and retreated to the side. Zhao Fu looked at the goddess of iron and stone and asked, "How were your gains from this battle?" Ironstone goddess smiled and said, "The total population was 5 billion, and there were 100 million ordinary god spirit soldiers. There were also countless other treasures." The Ice Goddess Alliance was a bit smaller than Pantheon, but it could not accommodate 3 billion people. So, these people could not be moved. Zhao Fu had to send soldiers to control them. Now that the Ice Goddess Alliance was under Pantheon's control, the situation was very unstable. It would take a while for it to stabilize. Zhao Fu sent generals and officials to Pantheon to manage the situation. He also used many people from the Ice Goddess Alliance to make the people more obedient. Then, Zhao Fu took all the gods back to Pantheon. This time, they had killed 12 godly spirits and subdued 19 godly spirits. Zhao Fu picked out 12 people and gave the divinity to them to fuse with so that they could become new gods. It took a few days to refine the god personalities, so Zhao Fu waited for a few days. In the end, he had them gather in Pantheon. The Pantheon was now filled with many god statues around a platform. All of them gave off a faint light and gave off a holy and dignified aura, making people feel awe and respect. Zhao Fu stood on the platform while the 31 gods stood below. Zhao Fu stretched out a hand and vigorously grabbed at them. The gods' bodies gave off waves of godly spirit power of different colors, and they continuously flowed into Zhao Fu's body. Chapter 1932. Zhao Fu needed to absorb the power of various godly spirits in order to awaken the god race's Emperor Star. As such, every time he obtained a godly spirit, he would quickly absorb their divine power. Various types of divine power flowed into Zhao Fu's body, and the divinity in Zhao Fu's mind continuously absorbed that divine power. After fusing with so much divine power, the divinity was slightly bigger than before, and the aura it gave off was even more powerful. Within Zhao Fu's mind, it gave off a faint black light and a dark and evil aura. This divinity had been formed by Zhao Fu devouring God Ker's divinity, which was a demon spirit. Zhao Fu's divinity was formed from that God Ker's divinity. So Zhao Fu's divinity was also a demon spirit, and it gave off a dark and evil aura. It could absorb the power of all kinds of gods, no matter what kind of god it was. For example, it could also absorb the power of some gods that countered each other, such as sun god power, light god power, and holy god power. However, no matter what kind of godly power it absorbed, it would form a dark and evil energy. Zhao Fu did not care too much about the attribute of this power, as he could control even more evil powers. He did not have to worry about the dark and evil energy corroding his soul and turning him into a dark and evil person. Moreover, as his divinity continuously became stronger, Zhao Fu was able to sense God Ker's location. After dealing with the Pantheon Palace, Zhao Fu would go to where God Ker was and personally take a look at God Ker's main body to resolve this enmity. After so many years, Zhao Fu did not know how powerful God Ker had become. However, Zhao Fu was confident that God Ker would not be a match for him, as his growth rate was dozens of times faster than God Ker's. Apart from resolving this enmity, Zhao Fu had another reason to find God Ker. Zhao Fu's divinity came from his divinity, and God Ker's divinity was the main body of divinity. There was a deep connection between them, and perhaps God Ker would become an existence that countered him. As such, Zhao Fu wanted to get rid of this problem so that he would not be threatened in the future. By then, it would be too late for regrets. Moreover, Zhao Fu felt that only by absorbing God Ker's divinity would he be able to complete his divinity. Perhaps there would be some changes, but of course, there might not be any. What surprised Zhao Fu was that after fusing with the various godly spirits' divine power, Zhao Fu could sense a trace of the god race's Emperor Star in the boundless void. Even though he could not summon the god race's Emperor Star, as long as he strengthened this connection, it would be possible for him to use this connection to draw out the god race's Emperor Star and awaken it. This proved that Zhao Fu's method was correct. He could continuously absorb godly spirits' power to awaken the god race's Emperor Star. The more godly spirits there were, the more powerful they would be, which would be of great help to Zhao Fu. This proved that Zhao Fu's method was correct. He could awaken the god race Emperor Star by continuously absorbing godly spirits' power. The more godly spirits there were, the more powerful they would be, and they would be of great help to Zhao Fu. It was a pity that Zhao Fu had fused with less than 100 godly spirits' power. If he wanted to truly awaken the god race Emperor Star, who knew how many godly spirits' power he would have to fuse with? Right now, Zhao Fu's bloodline was a level 20 divine bloodline, which was the highest grade of bloodline. It was almost impossible to raise it any further, as there was nothing or power that could affect such a high-grade bloodline. Ordinary holy sons of holy empires only had level 19 divine bloodlines, but Zhao Fu was already one level higher than them. From this, it could be seen just how high Zhao Fu's bloodline was. If he could awaken the god race Emperor Star, Zhao Fu's bloodline would be affected by the Emperor Star and would receive a massive amount of fate. When that time came, he would have a level 21 divine bloodline. Every level of bloodline was split into lower, middle, and upper stages. If Zhao Fu could reach upper stage 21, he would be able to call himself an origin bloodline. Even though it was only an upper stage 21 origin bloodline and only had a portion of the origin bloodline, it could still be called an origin bloodline. The origin race had disappeared from the world for countless years, and the power they possessed surpassed ordinary people's imaginations. They could casually change the heavens and earth, cause gods and demons to tremble in fear, and cause countless ghosts to howl. Even holy empires had to avoid them. This was how powerful the origin race was. Even if Zhao Fu had a portion of the origin bloodline, his power would be incredibly terrifying, and it would surpass even a divine bloodline. Just thinking about it made Zhao Fu feel quite excited. It seemed that he had to complete the Pantheon Palace as soon as possible and head to other places to find powerful godly spirits to absorb their legacy power. Even though it would be quite easy to subdue godly spirits here, the godly spirits here were too weak, and their legacy power was also quite weak. It would not be very effective against Zhao Fu. So Zhao Fu definitely had to leave this place. Boom! The divinity in Zhao Fu's mind absorbed countless traces of divine power, and suddenly gave off an intense black demonic light. A massive, godly spirit aura exploded out from Zhao Fu as if it was not under his control. This interrupted Zhao Fu's thoughts, and he felt an intense wave of divine power fill his body, causing his body to go through some sort of change. Sensing Zhao Fu's power, the godly spirit's expressions fell. They could sense that Zhao Fu was not absorbing their godly spirits, so they quickly retreated because that wave of power was simply too powerful. Zhao Fu's body gave off countless traces of intense black light, which pierced through the roof of the god palace and shined in all directions. The sky gradually darkened as a formless might spread out. The spirit energy in the surroundings flooded over, forming an enormous black vortex, and a terrifying aura spread out. Sensing this power, the godly spirits and soldiers in the surroundings could not help but feel terror, and they felt as if they had fallen into an abyss. This power was above them, and it was also a power that restrained them. They did not understand why this power was so terrifying. That direction was covered by demonic clouds, and no one knew what was going on. However, they were certain that this was related to Zhao Fu, and they could sense that this power belonged to Zhao Fu. The Jade Goddess looked quite serious as she looked in that direction and asked the Bronze Goddess beside her, Qing Nu, do you know what husband just wanted to do? Why did he cause such a commotion? The Bronze Goddess stood next to her and also looked towards the horizon as she said seriously, Husband just said that he took those godly spirits to the Pantheon Palace and had their power fuse into the 10,000 god spear. The Jade Goddess suddenly understood and said, It's most likely because husband absorbed those godly spirits' power, causing his body to go through great changes, which is why there are such terrifying ripples. Chapter 1933. The Jade Goddess said, let's hurry over and see what's going on. The Bronze Goddess replied, All right. The two of them turned into a stream of light and arrived near the Pantheon Temple. Now, the aura here was like a tidal wave, spreading out in all directions. The godly spirits that were originally here retreated in fear and stood outside the Pantheon Temple. The Bronze Goddess asked about what had just happened, and it was just as they had expected. Zhao Fu had absorbed the godly spirit's power and had changed. Following this, the Iron Goddess, Silver Goddess, and Metal Goddess hurried over and stood near the Pantheon Palace as they looked at it. The center of the Pantheon Palace was like the mouth of a dark spring, continuously giving off a dark and evil god-killing aura, making it so that no one could get close. The vortex in the sky became larger and larger, covering the surrounding tens of kilometers. An even greater might spread out, causing countless people to feel quite suppressed and feel quite uncomfortable. The surrounding heaven and earth power continuously flowed into the vortex, causing it to continuously spin and give off a terrifying power. Boom! A massive explosion sounded out as a ray of black light containing immense power shot down from the sky and landed on Zhao Fu's body. Zhao Fu's body excitedly absorbed the pillar of light's power and continued to go through changes. The divinity gave off even greater power and filled every part of Zhao Fu's body, causing Zhao Fu's body to go through even faster changes. The two powers helped Zhao Fu go through changes both inside and outside, and Zhao Fu felt his body quickly go through changes. Boom! A while later, a terrifying demon god aura flooded out like a flood, seeming to inundate everything. Sensing this power, the godly spirits waiting near the Pantheon Palace felt their hands and feet go cold. Feeling the power flowing out of his body, Zhao Fu roared as his body once again shot out countless rays of demonic light, causing a shockwave to ripple out. The ground immediately cracked as the various godly statues gave off godly spirits to defend against the shockwave. A massive image appeared in the sky. This image was 1,000 meters tall and wore a black cloak. Even though it was impossible to see its appearance, the eyes under the cloak gave off a terrifying, dark, cold, murderous, and domineering aura. It was as if it was the eyes of a peerless, ferocious creature. His body gave off a dense demonic chi and an incredibly terrifying power, causing the heavens and earth to dim and the sun and moon to go dim. This was a demonic god of darkness and wickedness that destroyed the world and slaughtered all living beings. The appearance of the shadow alerted the members of the Sun Alliance and the Night Goddess Alliance. Everyone looked in the direction of the Pantheon Temple in shock or pale. They could not help but feel some fear. These ripples belong to someone who has become a god. But why is it so terrifying? Just who is the person who has become a godly spirit? Pure darkness, evil, coldness, and murderous. This is the first time I've seen such a terrifying demon god. Why has such a terrifying demon god appeared here? Shouldn't it be at the center of the divine domain? Heavens, what is the Pantheon Temple doing? With such a terrifying Pantheon god lord, and now such a powerful demon god, how are we supposed to live? This is too much. I feel that the Sun Alliance and Night Goddess Alliance are not a match for the Pantheon Temple. The Pantheon Temple is too powerful and mysterious. It's not on the same level as us at all. Despicable. We should have destroyed the Pantheon Temple at all costs and not allowed it to have such terrifying power. It's too late to regret it now. Who would have thought that the Pantheon Temple would develop so quickly? Also, have you found out who that Pantheon God Lord is? Sensing the power and aura in the distance, the various godly spirits cried out in shock. All of them felt worried and afraid because that demon god's power was simply too terrifying. Boom! A massive explosion sounded out as a large figure rushed into a city and started a massacre. It slashed out with its sharp claws, sending out arcs of light that contained immense power that destroyed countless buildings. Countless people were crushed beneath them, causing them to howl in pain. This figure was 3 meters tall and had powerful muscles. It looked like a demon and had 3 short horns on its head. Its eyes were pure black, and it had 3 pupils. There were 2 pairs of wings on its back, one large and one small, and it gave off a terrifying aura. It was God Kerr from before. Before, God Kerr had looked like a small demon and was not very big. It only had a pair of black pupils, and its power was about the same as a weak, godly spirit. Before, it had thought that would be a mediocre little demon god and be threatened by other powerful godly spirits. It knew that with its talent and abilities, it would not be able to become a terrifying, godly spirit. To it, only by continuously absorbing faith could it become stronger, and that was the best way for it to become stronger. However, because of one thing, its fate had greatly changed. That matter had happened 9 years ago. It had been summoned by a believer and descended into the heaven-awakened world. However, it had never thought that it would be a trap, and countless black-armored soldiers had attacked it, wanting to kill it. This was simply laughable. As a high and mighty godly spirit, how could it be killed by an ordinary person? However, a person had appeared and started a fight with it. That person had left a deep impression on God Kerr, because it was that person who had killed its divine clone. This was the greatest humiliation in its life. It had lost to a weak human and had been forced to descend with its true body. In the end, that person had used some sort of method to strip away God Kerr's divinity, causing God Kerr's strength to decrease. This made God Kerr want to cut that person into 1,000 pieces, imprison his soul, and make him suffer immense pain. However, even though it was furious, it did not have the power to personally descend into the heaven-awakened world. As such, it could only wait and see if there was anything it could do. God Kerr remembered that person's appearance and aura, and it had even tasted that person's flesh. It had been incredibly delicious and had a pure royal bloodline. It had been the first time it had tasted such delicious flesh, so it had a deep impression of that person. Back then, when God Kerr had fought with that person, even though God Kerr had been quite dissatisfied, he had to admit that that person was incredibly terrifying and had great potential. With that kind of power, he had been able to kill God Kerr's true body. Chapter 1934. Before, he had thought that this was it. Even though he knew that that person was a scourge, because he did not have the ability to deal with him, he could only leave him there. However, from that moment onwards, his fate seemed to have greatly changed. First was his godhead. Ever since that incident, he had sensed an invisible force affecting his godhead, causing it to possess a terrifying power. To God Kerr, whose power had been quite ordinary, this was an incredibly pleasant surprise. What was more important was that this formless energy did not weaken as time passed, and it instead became stronger as time passed, causing his divinity to have even more terrifying power. At first, Godker did not know what was going on because he did not seem to have done anything, and he did not know where that energy had come from. However, after thinking about it, Godker was able to confirm that it had to do with that person because his divinity had changed on that day. It was very unlikely that his divinity had changed after that incident because he really had not done anything at all. It definitely was not a coincidence. Moreover, apart from that trace of divinity, there was nothing that could affect his divinity. After all, that trace of divinity was a part of his soul and source energy. Godker was quite curious as to what that person had done with that trace of divinity to cause him to change so much. Even though he did not know what had happened, this had turned from a good thing into a massive opportunity, causing Godker to wildly laugh. Now, he was even rejoicing that he had met that person, or else he would not have had such a great opportunity. The change in his divinity caused his body to slowly go through changes, and he became even more powerful. His current power had only reached its current level after 9 years of growth. Back then, he was not like this, and he was no longer in a remote region, but at the center of the godly domain. Going back to a few years ago, the change in his divinity had caused him to use a great deal of power. At that time, there was an enemy nearby who wanted to attack him and take over his territory. Demon gods were different from other gods. They loved to fight and kill, and they would not live peacefully like ordinary gods. They did not want to start a war or anything like that. Facing his enemy's attack, Kerr did not feel any fear, and he even felt a bit excited and expectant. You want to know just how powerful he was. On the ground, the soldiers from both sides fought ferociously. In the sky, Kerr and his enemy also started fighting. The enemy was a goat demon. It had the body of a human, but had a goat's head and demonic horns. It was covered in white fur, and its eyes were blood red. It held a spear. At that time, Cole's body was only slightly bigger than before. He wasn't as burly and strong as he was now. Boom! The goat demon held his spear and vigorously stabbed out, causing a wave of demonic chi to flow out and turn to a large evil snake that gave off a ferocious aura as it rushed at Kerr incredibly quickly. Just as it seemed like it was about to bite Kerr, Kerr gave a cold smile and a massive wave of power flowed into his pitchfork, causing it to give off a shocking aura. The pitchfork gave off a terrifying power as it stabbed out, piercing through the snake and causing it to shatter into pieces. After the force penetrated the demonic snake, it sent the goat demon flying, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. The goat demon looked incredibly shocked as it stared at Kerr and cried out, "How can you be so powerful?" Kerr could not help but loudly laugh as he said, "I'm no longer the god Kerr from before. This is my current power. You're no longer a match for me. And in the future, I'll become a mighty god Kerr king." The goat demon's expression was quite unsightly. Its strength had grown quite quickly, and it had wanted to see if it could destroy God Kerr. However, God Kerr's power far surpassed its expectations. Just what kind of fortune had Kerr obtained to have such terrifying power? Now, the goat demon understood that it was no match for God Kerr, so it did not want to fight with God Kerr. It turned and ran. Kerr disdainfully raised the pitchfork in his hand and sent a powerful wave of power into it. The pitchfork gave off a powerful aura, and an image of a massive pitchfork giving off terrifying demonic chi appeared, giving off terrifying power. Kerr vigorously swung the pitchfork image, and the gigantic pitchfork image smashed towards the goat demon. The goat demon sensed the danger behind it and felt quite startled, and it immediately released a defensive barrier. Bang! The pitchfork contained immense power as it smashed the goat demon to the ground. The goat demon heavily crashed onto the ground and coughed up a large mouthful of blood. Who knew how many of its bones had been broken? And it looked as if it had been heavily injured. God Kerr loudly laughed as it came before the goat demon and said, "I already said that you're not a match for me." The goat demon's expression was quite unsightly as it said, "How did you become so powerful?" Kerr laughed as he said, "Did you think I would tell you?" As he spoke, Kerr raised his pitchfork, preparing to kill the goat demon. The goat demon hurriedly said, "Don't kill me. If you can make me as powerful as you, I'm willing to submit to you and give all of my faction, treasures, and resources to you. With my help, you'll be able to develop even faster." Kerr acted as if he was thinking before suddenly stabbing out with his pitchfork, causing a massive hole to appear in the goat demon's body. The goat demon howled and died on the spot. Kerr disdainfully laughed as he said, "The things that killed you are also mine. Only I have such great power, and this will become my greatest secret." Did you think I would reveal it? After saying this, Kerr came to the goat demon's corpse and dug out a black, rhombus-shaped crystal. This was the goat demon's divinity. After digging out the divinity, Kerr wanted to find a trusted subordinate to absorb the divinity and become a demon god. However, after holding the divinity, Kerr sensed that his divinity wanted to absorb it, making him feel quite shocked. Ordinary godly spirits could not absorb other divinities' power. So why did his divinity want to absorb another divinity's power? Kerr could not figure out the reason, but he still tried to have his divinity absorb the goat demon's divinity's power. However, the sounds of battle around him interrupted his thoughts. They were still in a state of battle. It was not suitable for him to absorb the divinity's power here. Chapter 1935. After dealing with the goat demon faction, Kerr returned to his god palace and sat on a carpet. He took out the godly divinity and started to absorb its power. Powerful goat demon god power continuously spread out from the godly divinity and flowed into Kerr's body. The godly divinity continuously absorbed the goat demon god power and gave off faint demonic light and a shocking aura. Kerr could not help but feel delighted because he could feel his divine power quickly increasing. It was dozens of times faster than his own cultivation speed. This delightful discovery caused Kerr to feel delirious with delight. If there was such a method, his power would quickly become stronger and he would become a terrifying expert in a short period of time. However, this method required other godly divinities. Kerr thought about it. If he could quickly become stronger and kill other godly divinities to cultivate, that would be quite good. After continuing to absorb the godly divinity's power, Kerr was delighted to find that not only had he become stronger, but he had also fused with the goat demon's divine power, causing his power to become a bit higher. If he continued to fuse with other types of divine power, his divine power would become much more powerful and would directly affect his body and bloodline. Thinking about that, Kerr felt quite excited and continued to absorb the goat demon's godly divinity's power. After 10 or so days, Kerr completely absorbed the goat demon's godly divinity's power. The godly divinity shattered and turned into dust. After absorbing all of the goat demon's godly divinity's power, Kerr felt that his divine power had greatly increased and he had obtained a terrifying ability, which was to summon the goat demon that had been devoured. Kerr sat on the carpet, and the godly divinity within his body started to tremble as a powerful wave of demonic chi flowed out. The demonic chi continuously condensed and formed a figure similar to the goat demon from before. This goat demon had the power and divine arts of the previous goat demon, but did not have the goat demon's soul. It was like a puppet, and its power was greatly reduced. However, this did not mean that it was not terrifying. In the future, as long as Kerr devoured more godly divinities, the godly spirits he could summon would become more and more powerful. He could even form a godly spirit army, which was quite terrifying. Moreover, these godly spirits would have a portion of their previous power and divine arts. and they would retain most of the godly spirit's power. In other words, these condensed gods could use the various divine spells of the original gods, and their power would be the same. If the original gods had high-level power or terrifying abilities, the condensed gods would also have them. Sensing how terrifying his divinity was, Kerr smiled excitedly. He felt incredibly fortunate to have met that person. All of this was because of that person. In the future, it would definitely become a demon god king above the gods. He was very confident about this. Next up, Kel started to wage war frequently. He killed various deities to obtain godheads and devour them, causing his power to grow increasingly terrifying. This went on for more than a year. During this time, Kerr had killed more than 20 gods and devoured all of their godhood. As Kerr's power increased, his devouring speed also increased. He no longer needed over 10 days to devour a godhead. Now, he could devour it within a few days. What shocked Kerr even more was that the formless energy affecting his divinity had become many times stronger. Adding on the divinity's power that he had devoured, his body had gone through fundamental changes. His body had become more powerful, and he now had 3 double pupils in his eyes. His bloodline had also risen by many stages. His current power was unimaginable, and Kerr could faintly guess what that person had done to his divinity. It was very likely that that person had fused the divinity into his body. So as he became stronger, he would also be affected. At the same time, Kerr could sense that his fate was also affected and quickly increased. God Kerr felt quite shocked. Back then, he had felt that that person was not simple at all and had terrifying potential. Just how terrifying had that person become to be able to affect him so much? Thinking about that, Kerr's expression became quite serious. That person was dozens of times more terrifying than him, and Kerr could not help but feel fear. He was in the godly spirit world, while that person was in the heaven awakened world. They were in 2 separate worlds, and it would be best if they did not meet. However, if they did, they would definitely fight. Kerr was still quite furious about what had happened back then, and he believed that if he devoured that person, his power would become hundreds of times stronger. The demon god, king above all gods. There was a problem. Kerr understood that that person most likely wanted to devour his divinity. After all, that person's divinity had been taken from him, and it was incomplete. If Kerr wanted to become perfect, he would have to devour that person's divinity. Because Kerr understood how terrifying that person was, he did not waste any time and continuously expanded his faction. He devoured divinity so that he would have the power to kill that person in the future. A month later, perhaps because of that person's fate, Kerr's fate had become much stronger. He had unintentionally activated a historical remnants restriction, causing it to give off a shocking aura. Back then, demonic light covered the heavens and earth, causing the light to dim and clouds to swirl. A shocking aura spread out, causing countless creatures to feel terror. Kerr was delighted and wanted to enter the historical remnant to explore, but the situation once again changed. Boom! A massive explosion sounded out as a power that seemed to be able to lock down the heavens, and earth flooded out like a heaven-toppling flood. Everything was about to be destroyed, and countless creatures were incredibly terrified. Kerr fell into terror because this power was comparable to a higher being's divine power. A godly spirit equivalent to a higher being had descended. Immediately, Kerr did not hesitate and respectfully stood by the side. Even though he had devoured many divinities and had become incredibly powerful, facing a higher being level godly spirit, he would not be able to resist at all. The person who had come was also a demon god. He had black hair and a golden horn, and he wore black robes and had an evil-looking face. He had been attracted over by the ripples that the historical remnant had given off, but his gaze was quickly attracted by a figure. He could sense the aura that that person gave off, as well as that shocking and dark fate, and he had long since gained the power of an emperor. This was fate that only a peerless genius could have, and it was not an ordinary genius either. With such terrifying fate, it was possible that he would become a demon god emperor in the future, a terrifying existence that could surpass demon god kings and demon god emperors. Chapter 1936. Facing such a terrifying person's gaze, Kerr couldn't help but feel nervous, and he bowed and said, "Greetings, sir." Godfiend also reacted and said with a light smile, "You're welcome. Also, can you tell me who you are?" Kerr felt quite surprised. He had never thought that a demon god that could rival higher beings would speak to him so courteously. Kerr understood that this was a massive opportunity, so he directly told the demon god who he was. He was just a little devil god who had been staying here for about 200 years. The demon god revealed a pleasantly surprised expression when he heard that. He had originally thought that Kerr came from some terrifying faction in the center of the divine territory. After all, such a remote place could not possibly give birth to such a terrifying luck. But now, Kerr had said that he was just a minor god here without any powerful background. This meant that he had picked up a rare treasure. Although his current strength and luck were not very strong, he could easily kill them with his current strength. However, if he was brought back to the faction to be nurtured, with the Emperor God Spirit luck on him and the extraordinary power of the demon god that he emitted, his future would be unpredictable. Such a terrifying genius would be of great help to his faction. The demon god immediately made a decision and said with a smile, "Can you leave with me? I'll bring you to the center of the god domain and give you everything you want." Kerr was ecstatic. The center of the divine realm was a holy land for countless people. Naturally, he wanted to go there as well. There were countless treasures there and all sorts of fortuitous encounters there. Moreover, he wasn't going there alone. With his current strength, he wouldn't be able to survive. After all, there were simply too many terrifying existences in God's domain center. He could not afford to offend any one of them. However, things are different now. He was following an almighty being, and almighty beings were already the top existences in the world. With him as a backer, no one would be stupid enough to offend him. Kerr nodded without any hesitation. "I'm willing to follow you, sir." Emotion smiled. He didn't think that he would be able to subdue a supreme genius so easily. He had really picked up a treasure this time. Subsequently, the demon god brought Kerr to explore the ruins briefly before bringing him to the center of the divine territory. As for Kerr's original force, Kerr directly abandoned it and did not bother with it anymore. After all, such a small force was nothing to him. It was also useless to him. When he arrived at the center of the deity domain, Kel found out the identity of the demonic god. It turned out that he came from one of the strongest factions in the deity domain, the demonic god emperor faction. This faction was originally established by a demon god emperor, and it had been passed down to the present. It had countless demon gods, and its influence was extremely terrifying. In the center of the divine domain, there were very few factions that dared to offend it. With regards to Kerr's arrival, the demon god emperor's faction placed great importance on it. They personally investigated Kerr's identity and aura in case he was a spy sent by another faction. Looking at Kerr's fate and power, they felt incredibly shocked and could not believe that Kerr only came from a remote region. After an investigation, there were no problems with Kerr's identity. The demon god emperor was also pleasantly surprised that they could bring back a peerless proud son of heaven. As expected, the demon gods of the demon god imperial faction decided to nurture Kerr with all their might. They even made him the divine son of the demon god imperial faction. Dition was one of the noblest people in the demon godarch and was highly regarded by everyone in the demon godarch. Ordinary people had to look up to him, admire, and fear him. No one dared to offend him. Among the demon god emperors, Kerr did not know that there was only one Dition. Because he was the last to arrive, he was ranked 6th. There were 5 Dition sons in front of him. The 5 Dition sons' status and bloodline were much more noble than Kerr's. They were not people that Kerr, a remote region's god, could compare to. Therefore, the 5 Dition sons were very disdainful of Kerr, and some of them would even ridicule him. Kerr could only endure all this for now, because strength was what spoke for itself. These Dition sons had been specially nurtured since they were young. They used all kinds of heavenly treasures and were very powerful. Kerr was not their match at all, so he could only endure. As long as he was strong enough, he could shut them up. Kerr had the power to devour godhoods. He was also confident that he could surpass these Dtion's sons. Therefore, he remembered this grudge and would take revenge when he was strong enough. In the following days, Kerr constantly devoured godhoods. Because of the support of the demon god emperor, Kerr did not need to look for gods to kill. Large amounts of high-quality godhoods were given to him every day. His strength also became more and more terrifying. Soon, he caught up to those Dtion sons. Kerr's rapid growth shocked everyone in the demon god emperor. They also understood how terrifying Kerr's potential was. Ordinary people respected him even more and did not dare to offend him. The demon god emperor continued to increase his support for Kerr. In the end, Kerr did not disappoint them. His growth was faster than before, and his strength became more and more terrifying. He even challenged the 4th and 5th ranked geniuses and successfully defeated them. This shocked countless people. If he continued to grow, Kerr's achievements would definitely exceed ordinary people's imagination. His reputation would also surpass that of the 1st-ranked Dtion. This was because that Dtion seemed inferior in front of Kerr. Although Kerr enjoyed the worship and respect of the crowd, he could not be happy. Because he had such great power and such a fast rate of growth, it was not due to him alone. No one knew what had happened to that person. The power that affected his godhood had become more than 10 times stronger, causing his growth and strength to increase rapidly. If not for that person's influence, he would not have been so fast. This was his greatest secret, and no one knew that the reason why he was so powerful and so quickly growing was all because of that person. Without that person's influence, he would just be an ordinary little demon godly spirit. Just like that, time passed bit by bit. Kerr's strength grew stronger and stronger, and his rate of growth grew faster and faster. In the end, he challenged Dtion, who was ranked 1st. In the end, he defeated Dtion and became the undisputed number 1 Dtion. Countless people cheered for him, praised him, and worshipped him. God Kerr's name started to spread throughout the center of the godly domain, and the various large factions heard of Kerr's existence. They understood that an extremely terrifying genius had appeared, and they were quite wary of him. Chapter 1937. By now, Kerr's cultivation had reached a bottleneck, and he could no longer stay in the demon god empire to cultivate. As such, he had gone out to gain experience. He was currently rushing into a godly spirit faction and killing the commoners and soldiers, wanting to lure out the godly spirit and fight it before killing it and taking out the godly spirit's godhood to cultivate. As Kerr massacred, a handsome young man wearing blue clothes and giving off a massive godly spirit aura furiously rushed over and directly attacked Kerr. Kerr gave a trace of a cold smile and vigorously swung his pitchfork, sending out a ferocious gale. The young man held a saber and vigorously swung it, sending out a ferocious saber light with shocking power towards Kerr. Bang! The two attacks collided, resulting in a massive explosion. A terrifying shock wave spread out, forming a wild gale. Kerr gave off a powerful aura as he rushed at the young man. The young man was not weak either and also gave off a massive aura as he rushed at Kerr, and the two of them began an intense battle. Bang! An hour later, Kerr held his pitchfork and stabbed out with terrifying power, sending out a demonic light that pierced through the young man's body. The young man's body fell to the ground, and Kerr gave a trace of a smile as he grabbed out with his hand. A blue godhood floated out of the young man's body and quickly flew towards Kerr before being caught by him. Suddenly, Kerr seemed to sense something, and his smile froze on his face. He hurriedly turned and looked in a certain direction, a look of shock and displeasure on his face. This was because he had sensed that the person he had been wary of had come to the godly spirit world. Everything was as he had expected. They would have to fight sooner or later. It was simply unavoidable. Kerr also felt a wave of pressure. After so many years, even though his strength had rapidly grown and he had become the number 1 Emperor's godson, he did not know just how powerful that person had become. At this moment, an extremely beautiful woman in a black dress with a graceful figure walked over and asked in confusion, "What's wrong, Detion's son?" She was Kerr's personal attendant and was called Demon God Shun. Her status was quite noble and her talent was quite high, and it was only because Kerr had become the #1 Emperor's godson that he had such treatment. Kerr said solemnly, "My greatest enemy has appeared." Demonic God Shun revealed an astonished expression. She understood how terrifying Kerr's current strength was. In particular, the speed of his growth in recent years had far exceeded the expectations of everyone in the demonic god empire. Even a powerful existence would be shocked. This was because Kerr's performance had also far exceeded their expectations, making them feel that they had underestimated Kerr's potential. A few years ago, Kerr's growth speed was already very shocking. They were also surprised by Kerr's potential, so they made him the Divine Prince. However, they didn't expect Kerr's potential to become more and more terrifying with each passing year. In addition to the few battles he had with the other geniuses, his name was now resounding in the center of the divine realm. Countless people were shocked by Kerr's appearance. He was like the brightest star that had appeared out of nowhere. Everyone knew Kerr's name, and they also knew that the appearance of such a terrifying divine son of the demon god emperor had caused countless people to worship, admire, and fear him. He was even listed as one of the celestial realm's 10 great geniuses. Together with the other 9, he was listed as one of the celestial realm's 10 great geniuses. From this, one could see how great Kerr's reputation was. There was another thing that shocked the Almighties. It was Kerr's luck. As time passed, the Emperor's aura had already stabilized. Kerr could use his own strength to emit the aura of an emperor. What shocked the Almighties even more was that the Emperor's aura did not stop changing. It actually changed again, and it was faintly advancing towards the demon god. Although it was only faintly developing towards the demon god, and it wasn't very clear, this still made the Almighties ecstatic. This was because it was possible that the demon god's future achievements would surpass the founder of the demon god emperor. This was such a great thing, so shocking, so exciting. At that time, the demon god emperor's strength would improve further, and he would become the demon god. He might even become a saint-class force. This made all the Almighties of the demon god emperor pay a lot of attention to Kerr. They didn't want him to suffer any harm, so they gave him many life-saving items. They could even summon a few Almighty's avatars to descend at the same time. However, no one knew that all of Kerr's changes originated from another person. If that person died, the influence on Kerr would dissipate, and Kerr's potential would no longer change. It would remain the same, without any room for growth, and his strength would not be greatly reduced. This was because Kerr's godhead had been affected by that formless power for so many years, and it already possessed the power of that person to devour 10,000 gods. Although Kerr's strength would not be greatly affected, his luck would be severely damaged. This was because his emperor's luck, as well as the saint-class luck, were all supported by that person's luck. To be more precise, Kerr had taken a portion of that person's luck, which was why he had his current appearance. That person was the source, and Kerr was only a portion. Without that person's support, Kerr's luck would naturally collapse. The demon god Shin also understood how terrifying Kerr was. Now that he saw Kerr's appearance and heard his words, he couldn't help but feel shocked. Just what kind of person is Kerr's greatest enemy? Originally, he wanted to ask Kerr who that person was. If necessary, he could ask a faction's almighty being to deal with that person. With how much importance those almighty beings placed on Kerr, they definitely wouldn't refuse. However, Kerr didn't tell Demon God Shun, because if he did, his secret would be exposed. Moreover, he could only sense that person, but he couldn't confirm that person's location. Demon God Shun didn't ask anything else. He made a mental note that when he returned to the Demon God Emperor, he would investigate who that terrifying person was. Kerr now felt a wave of pressure, and he didn't feel any joy. He also decided that in the following days, he would become even stronger. Inside a mysterious and peculiar temple, the ground was pitch black, and there were various colored stars imprinted on it. The surrounding walls and ceiling were also pitch black, and there were different stars imprinted on them. Each of these stars emitted a different aura, and it looked very spectacular. 12 white-robed people were sitting cross-legged on the ground, forming a circle. There were old and young people, men and women. Chapter 1938. This white star was the god race's supreme emperor star, the highest god star. The highest god star was a star above the countless other god race stars. Not only did it reign above countless other stars, but none of them could compare to it. Moreover, the highest god star had the ability to rule over all other stars, and it was called the emperor star of all gods. It contained boundless might and could greatly suppress all god race stars. It could cause the heavens and earth to collapse and space to twist, and countless gods would revere it. Its main effects were similar to godhood. Those with the highest god star could gather a massive amount of faith. That was the god race's supreme emperor star, and if one gathered faith, it could only be described as boundless, and the power it gave off would naturally be incredibly terrifying. Moreover, if a godly spirit had such massive amounts of faith, their growth rate would be thousands of times faster than ordinary people. Moreover, it had the ability to influence countless creatures. Below the highest god star, all creatures would become believers. In other words, the power that the highest god star gave off could cause countless creatures to worship it and become its believers. What was most terrifying was that it had an ability called God's judgment. This ability was incredibly terrifying, and it countered all sorts of godly spirits. Almost no godly spirit could escape the God's judgment. This sort of judgment could not kill godly spirits, and it did not harm them at all. However, it could easily take away a godly spirit's godhood, causing that godly spirit to lose their right to be a godly spirit and lose all divine power. At the same time, it could allow an ordinary person without any power to condense their own godhood and become a powerful godly spirit. Ordinary people both loved and feared those with the highest god star because they could take away their right to be a godly spirit and casually make someone a godly spirit. The highest god star was incredibly terrifying, and there were very few of them. The godly spirit world and the heaven-awakened world's god domains were quite close, and people for both sides could freely come and go. However, even the younger generation did not have more than 5 highest god stars. In the heaven-awakened world's god domain, only one person had the highest god star. In the godly spirit world, only 3 people had the highest god star. It was said that one person from the heaven-awakened world and another person from the godly spirit world would participate in the king of God's trial. The previous king of gods was the person with the highest god star. Back then, the person who had competed with him was the other person with the highest god star. In the end, the two sides had engaged in a world-shaking battle. Countless people had personally witnessed their power, and it was said to be the most terrifying battle in 1,000 years. However, because there was only one king of gods, both sides had to determine a victor. In the end, one person would defeat the other and become the king of gods, while the other person would be disqualified. This time, there were 2 more people from the highest god star participating in the king of God's trial. One was from the heaven-awakened world, while the other was from the godly spirit world. Both sides were looking forward to seeing who would become this time's king of gods. The 2 people viewed these 2 with great importance, as they believed that they were the king of the god. As they the god, to God, God, king of continent and god star, world, and emperor, realm race. Of course, this sovereign god star wasn't the real sovereign god star because this star that floated above everyone's head was only 1 meter in size. How could the real sovereign god star be so small? This was the star that represented the god race's strongest star. This zenith god star was actually just a fragment of a zenith god star that had been smelted into its current form by some terrifying existence. This was the center of the divine realm, and it was also the location of a terrifying influence. This influence was called the highest divinity, and it had an extremely long history. Its influence was extremely terrifying, and it could be ranked in the top 3 of all the influences in the divine spirit world. It was much more terrifying than the influence of the demon god emperor. The 12 people sitting cross-legged on the ground were giving off an extremely terrifying aura. All of them had the aura of a higher being. Suddenly, the sovereign god star, which was floating in the air, emitted a powerful aura, and the light it emitted became even more intense. The 12 people sitting under the highest divine star sensed the changes in the highest divine star. They opened their eyes and looked at the sun god star, which was emitting an intense light. Another member of the god race has sensed the highest god star. To be able to cause such a strong reaction from the highest god star, it seems that there is hope for him to awaken the highest god star. There will be a 5th owner of the highest god star in the divine spirit world. This is quite a pleasant surprise. After all, our god race's supreme emperor stars are quite special, and we have the least. The demon race and devil race both have more than us, and we have more in the divine spirit world and the divine domain. Ah, that's right. If the death race's ghost domain and the Een domain are added on, they have twice as many emperor stars as we do. Every single highest god star is incredibly precious to our god race. Can you sense who it is that might awaken the highest god star? There are many famous people in the younger generation, and it just so happens that the king of God's trial is about to begin. Perhaps he will come. We can pay more attention when the time comes. I want to see which faction's godson can awaken the supreme emperor star. It's best if he doesn't have a powerful background. I'm lacking a legacy disciple. I've sensed this person, and he's not as simple as you think. There are boundless heaven's secrets surrounding him. It's the first time I've seen someone like that. Is that so? I'll also sense it. It's actually true. Just who is that person? He actually has such vast heaven's secrets, and I feel an intense sense of danger. That person is indeed incredibly terrifying. No wonder the highest god star had such a great reaction. It's a pity that there's such a powerful heaven's secrets shielding him, making it impossible for us to deduce who he is. Right now, I don't feel that he has any hope of awakening the highest god star, but that he will definitely awaken it. Why did such a terrifying person suddenly appear in the godly spirit world? I think this has to do with the king of God's trial. The king of gods has received the godly spirit world's fate, so it must have attracted that person to the godly spirit world. He'll definitely participate in the king of God's trial, so he obtained a massive amount of godly spirit fate and awakened the supreme emperor star. I feel the same way, but this time, the heaven-awakened world has a possessor of the highest god star, and the godly spirit world has another possessor of the highest god star. Adding on this terrifying opponent, I wonder what will happen when the 3 sides clash. I'm also looking forward to this. Let's wait and see when the king of God's trial begins. Chapter 1939. Back at the Pantheon Palace, Zhao Fu looked at his own changes in surprise. Before, Zhao Fu had said that absorbing godly spirit's power would cause his body to become godly. Now, after absorbing countless godly spirits' power, his body had become a godly spirit body, which was why there were such terrifying ripples. The 1,000-meter wide image gave off a heaven-toppling godly spirit aura, and it spread out like a flood, continuously causing the weather to change as it continuously absorbed heaven and earth power. Zhao Fu closed his eyes and started to refine the boundless power flowing into his body, stabilizing his godly spirit body and making it stronger. The others were also waiting outside the Pantheon Palace in shock. 3 hours later, the image in the sky disappeared and the surroundings returned to normal. Within the Pantheon Palace, Zhao Fu opened his eyes, which shot out a divine light. His body gave off a faint light and gave off a godly spirit's might. Sensing the changes in his body, Zhao Fu felt quite delighted. The first was his cultivation. Before, Zhao Fu's cultivation had been at the world realm, and now that he had condensed a godly spirit body, Zhao Fu's cultivation had risen to the divine realm. After the divine realm was the extreme divine realm, and then the emperor heaven realm. Zhao Fu felt that his cultivation was increasing incredibly quickly. Ordinary people would need decades to reach the divine realm, but he had done so in less than a year. Apart from his cultivation becoming stronger, he also obtained abilities after condensing a godly spirit body. The first was that Zhao Fu could manifest his godly spirit body, which was the 1,000-meter wide image that had just condensed in the sky. That was Zhao Fu's godly spirit body. In this state, Zhao Fu could absorb heaven and earth power around him, and his attacks would be many times more terrifying than before. His body also had a powerful advantage. If Zhao Fu could make his body 1,000 meters tall and face a 1,000-meter tall creature, he would be able to rush up and use his body's power to beat that creature to death. His power would be quite terrifying. In addition to the ability to manifest the body of a deity, Zhao Fu also had the ability to create doppelgangers like a deity. In other words, Zhao Fu could also divide a portion of his power to descend to a certain place, and the one who appeared there would be Zhao Fu's clone. This doppelganger had a portion of Zhao Fu's power, and this portion of power included a portion of his total power, not just a portion of a god's power. Zhao Fu's doppelganger could also use various abilities of the main body. Right now, he could only manifest his body. As for manifesting his weapon, he could only manifest a portion of the weapon's power, which was very weak. This was because gods generally had life-divine artifacts. That life-divine artifact was a divine artifact that was fused with the god, and the connection was extremely close. Gods could use the life-divine artifact as their limbs, so they could maximize the power of the divine artifact. But Zhao Fu couldn't, because he didn't have a life-divine weapon. He had many weapons, but Zhao Fu didn't choose any of them as his life-divine weapon, nor did he plan to. Apart from this ability, Zhao Fu could also create his own godly spirit army. This kind of godly spirit army wasn't a normal godly spirit army. It was a godly spirit army that could be summoned at any time. The summoned godly spirit army wasn't a real body, but a clone of the soldiers. Even if they all died, there wouldn't be any problems. In the end, they would just turn into energy and dissipate, and they wouldn't cause any damage to the main body. As for what kind of army and what kind of generals to summon, Zhao Fu could choose. He only needed to turn his godly spirit power into a summoning seed and fuse it into the soldier's body, causing the soldier's body and soul to fuse with the summoning seed. That way, the soldiers would be in the best condition and power. After fusing with the summoning seed, whenever Zhao Fu wanted to summon them, he could use a divine skill to summon them. For example, after fusing with God Ker's divinity, Zhao Fu had obtained the skill to summon a godly spirit army, which was the Hell's Gates, which could summon countless demons. If others obtained Zhao Fu's divinity, they could also obtain Zhao Fu's summoning skill and summon Zhao Fu's godly spirit army. This was something that couldn't be changed. After all, divinity and divinity were one, and whatever abilities Zhao Fu had, others would also obtain. However, it was most likely that no one would be able to obtain Zhao Fu's divinity. After Zhao Fu had obtained his divinity, he had also obtained his own divinity. Under normal circumstances, it wasn't very useful, so he hadn't used it. Of course, summoning a godly spirit army expended a lot of his own power, and it wasn't something that he could summon whenever he wanted. Moreover, the soldiers were very powerful. Finally, because of his divinity and godly spirit body, Zhao Fu also had another ability, which was the ability to communicate mentally. This ability allowed him to form a mental connection with his worshippers and priests. No matter where they were, even if they were in different worlds, Zhao Fu would be able to hear them. However, the distance could not be too far, and there had to be no interference. The more powerful one's divine power was, the further the mental connection would be, and the weaker one's strength was, the shorter the mental connection would be. Most godly spirits blocked off their mental connection with their worshippers because they had too many worshippers. If they had a mental connection, tens of thousands of worshippers' voices would ring out in their minds, and their minds would explode. Most godly spirits were connected to their priests, and because priests could communicate with godly spirits, Their mental connection was much further than that of ordinary worshippers. Moreover, priests' prayers were much more powerful than ordinary worshippers, so they were able to communicate with godly spirits more easily. As such, under normal circumstances, godly spirits would only communicate with priests, and through priests, they would understand all sorts of things. Zhao Fu thought about it and decided that he could pick out a few women to be priests. This was because it was quite convenient. If Zhao Fu was somewhere else, they could directly notify Zhao Fu through prayers, and they would not have to find Zhao Fu or communicate through letters. If something happened, Zhao Fu could summon clones through priests to resolve things. After checking his power, Zhao Fu gave a trace of smile. At that moment, the Jade Goddess and the other godly spirits once again walked into the Pantheon Palace. Sensing that Zhao Fu had given off even more power, they smiled and congratulated Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu nodded and had the 30 or so godly spirits send their power into the 10,000 god spear. Because of what had just happened, they had not done this yet. Chapter 1940. After absorbing the power of many godly spirits, the 10,000 god spear's power once again greatly increased. This time, it had fused with the power of 30 or so godly spirits. After dealing with this matter, the Pantheon Palace became peaceful again, because they had unified and devoured another alliance. They had to stabilize the situation before they could do anything else, or else they would easily lose control. The two alliances, the Sun Alliance and Night God Alliance, were now actively asking about the Pantheon Palace. Most importantly, they wanted to find out who had caused those ripples. Zhao Fu did not care about this. Seeing that there was nothing else, he thought to himself, now that he had a godly divinity and a godly spirit's body, he had godly spirit's abilities. He could build his own god temple and god statue and pick out priestesses. He could leave the god temple and god statue to others, and they could just follow his orders. As for priestesses, it was quite simple because Zhao Fu had long since picked them. They were the Pantheon Palace's priestesses, and they had been picked from countless women. Not only were they quite beautiful, but they also had decent talent. They were all Pantheon Palace's priestesses and had godly power, so they were suitable to become his priestesses. Following this, Zhao Fu called over the 4 high priestesses, the fiery Yi Hongling, the quiet Dong Yu, the gentle Jiang Nan, and the pure Shangling air came before Zhao Fu and gave a trace of smile as they bowed. The 4 of them were the high priestesses in charge of the Pantheon Temple and the numerous priestesses. They possessed the power of the Pantheon Temple, and they were also the 4 most outstanding people in terms of beauty and aptitude. Yi Hongling gave a trace of smile as she said, "What business does God Lord have with us?" Zhao Fu smiled as he said, "It's nothing much. I just want to appoint you as my priestesses." Before, they had only been Pantheon Palace's priestesses, and now that they had become priestesses of godly spirits, they had to be reappointed. Hearing this, the 4 women felt quite delighted. In the future, they would be Pantheon Palace's priestesses and Zhao Fu's priestesses, so they would definitely be valued by the Pantheon Palace. Moreover, if they became Zhao Fu's priestesses, they would be able to directly communicate with Zhao Fu, which was an advantage that other goddesses did not have. "Thank you, Divine Master, for thinking highly of me." The 4 women had beautiful smiles on their faces as they bowed to Zhao Fu and spoke in unison to Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu responded with a smile and stretched out a hand. The 4 women also understood and knelt on the ground. At that moment, the godhood in Zhao Fu's mind unleashed a stream of energy toward Zhao Fu's palm. It turned into 4 rays of black light that shot into the foreheads of the 4 priestesses. The 4 priestesses immediately felt a powerful force surge into their bodies. This force was slightly different from the 10,000 god spear. Although they both had 10,000 gods' power, their natures were somewhat different. Zhao Fu's 10,000 gods' power was the power emitted by his godhead, which was inclined towards spiritual power, while the 10,000 god spear was inclined towards metal power. Because the priest's souls were connected to the godhood, the four priests had to have the power of Zhao Fu's godhood. As the four priestesses absorbed Zhao Fu's godhood's power, a black dragon appeared between their foreheads. This was Zhao Fu's godly spirit mark, which was similar to the king mark from before. After the godly spirit mark appeared, this meant that the four priestesses had successfully become Zhao Fu's priestesses. The four women could sense that their body's power had once again increased, and they now had two types of 10,000 gods' power. Their faces were bright as they said to Zhao Fu, "Thank you, God Lord." Zhao Fu smiled as he said, "Now, show me your power." As Zhao Fu's priestesses, they naturally could not just communicate with Zhao Fu, and they naturally had great power as well. Now, they had two types of 10,000 gods' power within their bodies, and if they used them together, there would be shocking changes. The four women obeyed Zhao Fu's words and started to unleash their powers. Their bodies gave off platinum-colored light as powerful auras spread out from their bodies. They grabbed out with their hands, causing a platinum-colored light to shine out. The spirit energy in the surroundings gathered, forming a platinum-colored spear, and platinum-colored chains appeared around their bodies. The spear and chains were both condensed from 10,000 gods' power, and both of them were quite powerful. The holy songs that they sang were even more pleasing to the ears than before, and their drowsiness effects were even greater. At the same time, they also had the ability to devour god power. This was not devouring godhoods, as they could not devour godhoods yet. However, devouring godly spirits' god power was still a very powerful ability. Finally, they could use god skills to summon the godly spirit Zhao Fu to descend. They could also have Zhao Fu enter their bodies and control them. Zhao Fu sensed their power and found that it was quite good. It was a pity that because of the restrictions of the godhood, he could not make all of them priestesses. So he said, "All right, you can go now. You can all leave." The other three priestesses responded with smiles on their faces. Xiangling Er's face became slightly red as she came to a chair and sat next to Zhao Fu. She hugged Zhao Fu's arm and said shyly, "God Lord, can I spend some time with you? I haven't seen you for a few days, and I've missed you." Zhao Fu lightly laughed and hugged Xiangling Er. The three goddesses, who had been about to leave, looked quite confused. They had never thought that Xiangling Er would be so intimate with a mighty god lord, and they could not help but feel admiration. Suddenly, they thought about what had happened at the banquet last time. Xiangling Er had come back with a red face and had even changed her clothes. She had not said anything. It was most likely because of Zhao Fu. Yi Hongling thought about it and decided that she also wanted to be so intimate with Zhao Fu. She flirtatiously smiled and sat on Zhao Fu's body as she said, "God Lord, our priestesses serve godly spirits. You can't just dote on little sister Xiangling Er." The two other priestesses also sat next to Zhao Fu with red faces and looked at Zhao Fu in anticipation. Xiangling Er said with a red face, "It's not what you think. Because of the God Lord's art, he can't dote on us." Hearing this, the three other priestesses looked quite disappointed. Zhao Fu looked at the priestess and smiled as he said, "You can all leave. I have some matters to attend to." The four women could only let go of Zhao Fu and dejectedly listen to Zhao Fu as they left. Zhao Fu went to the army camp. The goddess of iron and stone felt quite surprised and asked, "Husband, why have you come again? Why are you here again? What's the matter?" Chapter 1941. Zhao Fu gave a simple explanation, and the goddess of iron and stone understood. Zhao Fu's orders were to pick out the most outstanding people from the God Palace's countless soldiers to form a godly spirit army that Zhao Fu would personally control, which was his personal army. The goddess of iron and stone quickly picked 100,000 soldiers for Zhao Fu. These soldiers were all elites of the army and had been chosen from 300 million soldiers. They were all veterans, and now that the Pantheon Temple had 6 billion or so people, they were recruiting new soldiers, causing the Pantheon Temple to have 500 million soldiers. Moreover, with Zhao Fu's divinity's power, he could only summon 100,000 godly spirit soldiers. As such, The goddess of iron and stone only chose 100,000 soldiers. Any more would be useless. If Zhao Fu's divinity's power became a bit stronger, he would be able to pick more soldiers to join the Pantheon Temple. The 100,000 soldiers gathered below a stage, looking incredibly excited and shocked. They had heard that they would be the mighty god lord's Pantheon Temple's divinity's power, and this was a supreme glory. Boom! Zhao Fu stood on the stage and raised a hand as the divinity in his mind continuously trembled. A massive, godly spirit aura exploded out, and his body gave off an intense demonic light. A massive wave of power gathered in Zhao Fu's hand, forming a black orb of light. This was the summoning seed, and if he fused it into a soldier's body, he would be able to summon a soldier. Moreover, it was not just limited to soldiers. Anyone who fused the summoning seed into a creature's body will be able to summon all sorts of creatures. The creatures that were summoned were all clones, and they were not as powerful as the main body. However, their deaths would not affect the main body at all, and this was the greatest advantage. They could continuously summon. After condensing the summoning seed, Zhao Fu raised his hand and tossed it upwards, causing the black orb of light to fly out and hover above the army's heads. Bang! The black orb of light exploded, turning into countless motes of black light that fell into the countless soldiers' bodies. The soldiers started to fuse with the motes of black light, and their bodies gave off a faint demonic light. In the end, the countless soldiers fused with the black specks of light, and the demonic light emitted from their bodies dissipated. However, this was not the end. At that moment, Zhao Fu closed his eyes and grabbed out with his hand, causing a terrifying aura to spread out as a black, metallic door containing immense power appeared behind Zhao Fu. The black metal gate was 10 or so meters tall, and there were carvings of countless soldiers fighting on it. It gave off an intense and somber aura. The door that had appeared behind Zhao Fu was the godly spirit door. Ordinary godly spirits would use this godly spirit door to summon countless soldiers or beasts to help the godly spirit in battle. This was also considered a type of divine art. It relied on divine power to condense, so there was no need to personally create a divine spirit gate. Boom! Zhao Fu's hand descended, and the divine spirit gate gave off a massive aura. Boundless God, light shined out, and a formless energy spread out. The countless soldiers' bodies gave off waves of black aura that flooded into the godly spirit gate. The godly spirit gate started to fuse with the countless soldiers, allowing Zhao Fu to summon them at any time. A while later, the godly spirit gate fused with the soldiers' auras, and there were now many more soldiers' auras. Zhao Fu waved his hand, and the godly spirit gate turned into countless traces of demonic qi and dissipated. The summoning of the godly spirit army was complete. Husband, are you done? The Iron Goddess smiled as she looked at the godly spirit gate disappear and said to Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu smiled and nodded before saying, I'll leave the army to you to train. I'll attack the Sun Alliance as soon as possible. I don't want to see any problems when that time comes. The Iron Goddess smiled as she said, Don't worry, husband. I won't disappoint you. Zhao Fu smiled as he said, I'll be going now. Don't tire yourself out too much. The Iron Goddess's face became slightly red as she nodded. Following this, Zhao Fu left the army camp and returned to the Pantheon Palace to take care of some administrative matters, which took him 2 days. During those 2 days, Zhao Fu's god statue and god temple were completed, and the guards invited Zhao Fu over to take a look. Zhao Fu came before the god temple and looked at it. It was mainly made of wood, and the roof was made of black tiles. The ground was also made of black bricks, and it looked incredibly dignified, spacious, and solemn. Zhao Fu did not pay much attention to this god temple and went inside. There was nothing within the spacious god temple except for a god platform, on which there was a statue. This statue was made of black jade and was 10 meters tall. It looked exactly the same as Zhao Fu, and it wore a cloak and had a long sword at its waist. Its appearance could not be seen clearly, and it gave off a mysterious and powerful aura. Zhao Fu stretched out a hand towards the godly divinity. Zhao Fu only needed to fuse the godly divinity's power into the god statue, and it would become Zhao Fu's first god statue. Countless worshippers and priests could pray in front of the god statue. Because there was a god statue of Zhao Fu here, the spiritual connection with Zhao Fu was quite strong. If there were any fervent worshippers, they could break through the barriers and form a spiritual connection with the godly spirit. Zhao Fu closed his eyes, and the godly divinity in his mind once again trembled and gave off a massive wave of divine power. A wave of black energy continuously flowed out from Zhao Fu's hand and into the god statue. The god statue absorbed Zhao Fu's godly spirit and started to change. It became more detailed and seemed to have its own life, and it gave off a formless aura. Crack! Not too long after, a sound sounded out as countless cracks appeared on the god statue before it collapsed and turned into fragments. Zhao Fu opened his eyes in surprise and looked at the fragments. He had just sent his divine power into the god statue, and his fate had also flowed in. Zhao Fu had not intentionally sent this fate into the god statue. Instead, it had followed Zhao Fu's divine power into the god statue. Because this was Zhao Fu's first god statue, the fate would automatically gather on it. As such, most godly spirit factions' god statues were godly spirits' first god statues. However, as Zhao Fu continuously sent his divine power into the god statue, the fate that followed seemed to clash with the god statue itself, and it destroyed Zhao Fu's god statue. Zhao Fu felt quite confused and had never thought that such a thing would happen. How could his fate destroy his god statue? After thinking about it, Zhao Fu felt that there was a possibility. As an emperor, he could not become a godly spirit. Not only could he not absorb any faith, but he could not even have a god statue. Chapter 1942. This caused Zhao Fu's fate to enter the god statue and destroy it instead of giving it fate. At the same time, Zhao Fu was still unable to absorb faith power and could only grow by absorbing godly spirit power. This was most likely the reason for this, or else there would be no other explanation. Zhao Fu thought about it and realized that becoming a godly spirit would not be very useful. After all, Zhao Fu already had the basic abilities of a godly spirit, but he could not absorb faith power and could not have his own god statue. Looking at the shattered pieces on the ground, Zhao Fu did not pay too much mind. He only felt that it was a pity that the resources he had spent on building this god temple and carving this god statue had been wasted. Following this, Zhao Fu returned to Pantheon Palace and ordered people to gather information on the Sun Alliance and Night God Alliance. Now, he could decide on a plan to destroy them. The Sun Alliance and Night God Alliance were currently making preparations because Pantheon had merged with the two alliances' factions. They were simply too terrifying, and they understood that Pantheon would act against them sooner or later. They were even thinking of launching an attack on the Pantheon Temple before the situation in the Pantheon Temple stabilized. They were currently discussing this. Let's act first and gain the upper hand. Perhaps we'll be able to achieve good results. We can't wait like this. Once Pantheon merges with all of its factions, we won't have any advantage at all. I agree. Pantheon is simply too terrifying. We should destroy them as soon as possible, or else Pantheon will destroy us. That's easy for you to say. Right now, Pantheon isn't something you can destroy just because you want to. Perhaps if we charge over, we'll fall into Pantheon's trap and suffer heavy casualties. That's right. We can't be too hasty. Let's discuss this in detail first. I have a suggestion. How about we sign a contract with Pantheon and ask them not to attack us in exchange for not participating in the battle with the Sun Alliance? I agree with this suggestion. Those two aren't good people, so let them fight each other. It's best if we don't get hurt. You bunch of idiots. After Pantheon destroys the Sun Alliance, will they let the Night God Alliance off? Wishful thinking. I think the best thing to do right now is to let go of our grievances and ally with the Sun Alliance. This won't do. I don't want to ally with the Sun Alliance. They've killed many of my people, and even my father died at their hands. Yeah, back then, the Sun Alliance attacked us unscrupulously and killed many of our people and gods. How could they let go of this huge hatred so easily? The Night Goddess Alliance was divided internally. There were those who wanted to fight, those who wanted to defend, and those who wanted to negotiate. At the same time, there were those who wanted to form an alliance, and those who opposed it. Both parties couldn't come to a consensus after some discussion and could only continue to argue in the Congress Divine Temple. The Sun Alliance's opinion was relatively unified because they understood that Pantheon would definitely attack them first. It was impossible for them to negotiate with the Pantheon Temple, nor could they submit to the Pantheon Temple. A war between the two sides was unavoidable. Under the threat of extinction, they could only unite their opinions and put their own faction first. At this time, the first thing they did was naturally to send people to persuade the people of the Night Goddess Alliance. Now, that Pantheon had merged the forces of two alliances. Even if the Sun Alliance put up all sorts of defenses, they could still be destroyed by Pantheon in the end. If they wanted to stop Pantheon, they had to ally with the Night Goddess Alliance. For this, they were willing to lower their stance and even apologize to those factions, asking them to let go of their previous grievances and unite to stop Pantheon. However, the factions that had been attacked by the Sun Alliance in the past did not accept this. After all, the Sun Alliance had killed so many of their people and taken all sorts of things, so a simple apology was not enough to appease them. However, this was still somewhat useful, and some factions were willing to ally with the Sun Alliance. However, the Night Goddess Alliance was still divided internally. This made it so that the Night Goddess Alliance could not give a united response, and the Sun Alliance was quite annoyed. They had already lowered their stance and taken the initiative to apologize, but those idiots still did not accept it. If it wasn't for the fact that they were afraid of Pantheon, they definitely would not have done such a thing. Now that the Night Goddess Alliance did not ally, the Sun Alliance could only strengthen their defenses and defend against Pantheon, who could attack at any time. Moreover, they shamelessly endured their anger and went to persuade the people of the Night Goddess Alliance. After all, without them allying together, they would not be able to do much against the terrifying Pantheon. The Night Goddess Alliance's situation was still quite divided, and they were unable to come to an agreement. This was the current situation, and it seemed to be quite beneficial to Pantheon. If they could not ally together, it would be easier for Pantheon to deal with them. However, Zhao Fu did not directly attack because he had devoured too many factions, and it would not be good for him to attack again. As long as they waited for a period of time, when everything stabilized, that would be the moment when the two alliances would perish. Now, Zhao Fu wanted to use his previous method to see if he could control some of the smaller factions in the alliance. If he could work with those smaller factions, it would be easier to deal with the two alliances. Thinking to there, Zhao Fu gave a trace of a smile and put all of these matters aside as he snuck into the Night Goddess Alliance. Because the Sun Alliance's army was on high alert, it would be difficult for him to act, so Zhao Fu chose the Night Goddess Alliance, which was less vigilant. Zhao Fu had gathered information from various factions and had some understanding of the factions in the two alliances. Zhao Fu's first target was a swamp godly spirit, who was an ugly old woman. She had average strength and would be quite easy to deal with. Even though that was what Zhao Fu thought, after snuck into that faction, he found that things were completely different. The old woman was currently cultivating within a temple, and there were many soldiers standing guard outside. Moreover, there were restrictions and all sorts of magic formations around her, making it impossible for anyone to sneak in. Zhao Fu frowned because he could not sneak in, and he could not force his way in either. It seemed that these factions were on guard against him. Even though they did not know how Zhao Fu had controlled those godly spirits to join Pantheon, they made their defenses incredibly tight and did not want to end up like those godly spirits. Chapter 1943. After returning to Pantheon Palace, Zhao Fu could only obediently wait for the time to act. Before he knew it, half a month had passed. Even though the situation was not completely without problems, it was much better than before. As for the army, after half a month of continuous training, they had become one and were familiar with Pantheon's fighting style. They could cooperate better and control Pantheon's power. Zhao Fu felt that now was the time to attack the Sun Alliance and Night God Alliance. So he gathered Pantheon's godly spirits and generals to discuss. No one had any objections to attacking the two alliances. Pantheon's main problem was how to attack. If the two of them allied together, they would have the same number of soldiers as Pantheon. Pantheon would not have much of an advantage in terms of numbers, and if they started fighting, Pantheon would suffer heavy losses. Zhao Fu looked into the two alliances and found that it was the same. The Sun Alliance defended while trying to convince the Night God Alliance to ally with them. The Night God Alliance's opinion was still not unified. Some people said that they should ally with the Sun Alliance for the sake of the big picture and put aside their previous grievances, while others said that they should not ally with the Sun Alliance. Rather than ally with them, they should join Pantheon. From the information they had obtained, the biggest breakthrough point for attacking the two alliances was most likely the Night God Alliance. If they could convince some Night God factions, Pantheon would be able to destroy the two alliances easily. Zhao Fu and the generals came up with two plans. The first was to establish a good relationship with the Night God Alliance and have them not participate in the battle between Pantheon and the Sun Alliance. The second was to see if they could convince some factions to join Pantheon. The two plans were quickly implemented. Zhao Fu sent out many ambassadors with all sorts of gifts to the Night God Alliance. The Night God Alliance was quite surprised by Pantheon's actions. They had never thought that Pantheon would take the initiative to be so friendly. They were not stupid, and they understood Pantheon's intentions. This matter was very important. The Night God Alliance put aside the Pantheon ambassadors and began to discuss with the other factions. Do you think we should agree to Pantheon? If they promise never to attack us, I think we can agree. That's not very likely. Pantheon's goal is to unify this region. Do you think they will let us go? I think it's best if we refuse to befriend the Pantheon Temple and resist the Pantheon Temple together. Sigh. For the Pantheon Temple to suddenly make such a move, it seems like they want to start a war. The situation is going to become turbulent again. Let's discuss this matter. Also, the various factions in Pantheon have sent out envoys. All of you have to be firm and don't be tempted and cause the alliance to fall into danger. Yes, we understand. Don't worry about this matter. By now, the Sun Alliance found out about what Pantheon had done, and they were greatly shocked. They ordered people to bring large amounts of gifts to convince the Night Goddess Alliance. This was because the Night Goddess Alliance was the greatest helper in resisting Pantheon. If they were really convinced by Pantheon, the Sun Alliance would be in great danger. So they had to stop Pantheon's plans. With the participation of the Sun Alliance's emissary, the discussion in the Night Goddess Alliance became even more intense. A few hours later, to Zhao Fu's surprise, the Night Goddess Alliance accepted the gifts and agreed not to participate in the war between Pantheon and the Sun Alliance. However, Pantheon had to sign a contract with the Night Goddess Alliance. Zhao Fu could not help but feel delighted and immediately agreed, and he personally went to the Night Goddess Alliance. Seeing the black-cloaked Zhao Fu give off a powerful aura, the godly spirits felt quite fearful. After all, this person was the most terrifying and famous Pantheon's God Lord. This was non-exaggeration. With Zhao Fu's abilities, no matter where he went, he would definitely become a terrifying existence and make countless people fear him. The Night God Alliance was the leader of the Night God faction, and it was led by 6 Night Gods. These 6 were all women. One of them had a graceful figure and looked quite mature. She was the leader of the Night Goddess Alliance and the person with the most authority. She was called Yilin. The other 5 were quite beautiful. One of them had a seductive figure and was called Yiluo. One of them looked quite dignified. One of them was called Yi Mingming. One of them had a gentle aura and was called Yiluo. One of them had a seductive figure and was called Yinong. And one of them had a beautiful appearance and was called Yiyu. Yilin came up and gave a trace of smile as she said, Now that I've personally seen the legendary God Lord, you're indeed extraordinary." Zhao Fu lightly laughed as he said, "I've often heard of the Night Goddess Alliance's reputation. You're indeed beautiful." Yilin smiled as she said, "Thank you for your praise, God Lord. Let's discuss the contract first." Zhao Fu smiled and nodded. Following this, Zhao Fu and the Night Goddess Alliance's people started to discuss and write out the contents of the contract. After an hour, they finished discussing the contents of the contract. The contract was a scroll that was 2 meters long. It was green and had cloud-like inscriptions around it, and it was now filled with words. The godly spirits cut their fingers and pressed their hand seals onto the scroll. Zhao Fu also cut his hand and pressed his hand seals onto the scroll, and the contract immediately took effect. It turned into countless green motes of light and disappeared before fusing into Zhao Fu and the godly spirits' bodies. After completing the contract, Zhao Fu smiled and returned to Pantheon. Now that the contract had been signed, the Night Goddess Alliance would no longer participate in the battle. Now was the time to attack the Sun Alliance. Zhao Fu gathered 450 million soldiers and launched an all-out attack against the Sun Alliance. Rumble, Pantheon's army was dressed in white armor and gave off immense power like a white ocean. They gave off a boundless aura that shook the surroundings, and countless creatures felt a sense of fear. The Sun Alliance gathered all of its soldiers and defended on the defensive walls. All of their expressions were quite serious. This battle was disadvantageous to both of them. They only had 300 million soldiers, and their battle power and equipment were not complete because they came from different factions. On the other hand, Pantheon's army had 450 million soldiers, and their battle power and morale were quite high. Zhao Fu stood in the sky with 60 or so godly spirits behind him, giving off powerful auras. The Sun Alliance stood on one side, with 3 sun gods at the lead and 40 or so godly spirits behind them. Both sides gave off powerful auras, causing the heavens and earth to dim and clouds to swirl. Terrifying auras caused the air around them to seem to freeze. The 3 sun gods on the other side were 2 women and 1 man. The man had short golden hair and was quite handsome, and he was called Sun Crow. Chapter 1944. Zhao Fu gave a trace of a smile as he said, "It's best if the 3 of you submit to me as soon as possible. I won't mistreat you." The Sun Crow said coldly, "Don't be so confident that we'll definitely lose. If you want to fight, let's fight. We're not afraid of you." Zhao Fu's gaze was slightly cold as he gave the order to launch an all-out attack. Boom! The countless Pantheon God Palace soldiers were like a white ocean that gave off shocking auras as they rushed towards the defensive wall, seeming as if they could destroy everything. On the Sun Alliance's side, countless archers vigorously drew their bows and aimed at the Pantheon army before loosening their bows. Swish, swish, swish. Countless arrows containing immense power shot out incredibly quickly. They were densely packed, and they were like a massive downpour, wanting to kill all creatures. On the Pantheon God Palace's side, countless soldiers gave off powerful auras, and countless traces of platinum aura condensed in the air, forming a massive platinum shield that blocked the countless arrows. This wave of ferocious arrows did not deal much damage to the Pantheon God Palace, and the Pantheon God Palace army gave off powerful auras as they continued to charge at the Sun Alliance. Seeing the Pantheon God Palace army charging over with their massive shields, the Sun God's expression became serious as he immediately gave an order. Boom! A massive explosion sounded out as boundless light shined out from the sky. A searing aura spread out as a massive magic formation appeared in the sky, and heaven and earth power continuously gathered. Scree! Cries sounded out as golden crane-like divine birds flew out from the magic formation. Each of them was 2 meters long and gave off intense light and searing heat. These were sun god birds, and there were countless of them. They covered the entire sky and gave off searing heat, causing the sky to be filled with all sorts of light. Bang! 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 the countless sun god birds gave off powerful auras as they flew towards the Pantheon God Palace army and slammed into the platinum shield, resulting in explosions. Sparks flew everywhere as terrifying shockwaves spread out. Under these massive attacks, the Pantheon God Palace army could not help but stop and focus on maintaining the platinum shield to defend against the countless sun god birds. However, the countless sun god birds were simply too powerful, causing cracks to appear on the platinum shield, and it looked like it was about to shatter. Shio, shio, shio. At that moment, arrows once again shot out from the defensive walls. The arrows contained immense force as they landed on the platinum-colored shield, causing it to shatter. Countless sun god birds gave off searing hot auras, and countless arrows filled with power as they continued to fly towards the countless soldiers. At this moment of danger, the sun god birds' eyes lit up. Boom! The soldiers exploded out with all of their power and gave off platinum-colored aura, forming an enormous platinum-colored aura flame. The aura flame formed a tiger-like creature with a pair of sharp teeth and a single horn. It was the omnipotent god beast. Roar! The massive platinum-colored omnipotent god beast roared towards the sky. An extremely powerful energy turned into a terrifying shockwave that seemed to be able to destroy the heavens and earth. It instantly swept out, seeming to be unstoppable. Bang, bang, bang. The countless sun god birds that flew over all exploded, releasing intense explosions. The countless arrows were shattered, turning into countless fragments that shot in all directions. The Sun Alliance's side was shocked. They had not expected the Pantheon Palace's army to suddenly unleash such a terrifying attack. Roar! The platinum-colored omnipotent god beast once again gave off a heaven-shaking roar and gave off a heaven-toppling aura as it rushed towards the defensive walls. The Sun Alliance's soldiers hurriedly exploded out with all of their power, causing their auras to form a massive sun god bird that gave off intense light and a heat that seemed to be able to incinerate everything. Scree! The sun god bird gave off a piercing cry and spread its wings, giving off an enormous wave of heat as it rushed towards the incoming omnipotent god beast. Boom! The two massive creatures gave off shocking power as they collided, resulting in a massive explosion. The terrifying energy seemed to be able to tear through space and spread out, turning into a powerful gale that swept out. The two massive creatures ferociously fought in the air, continuously clashing and using their beaks and claws to attack each other. They gave off terrifying shockwaves that caused the heavens and earth to dim. Boom! The massive magic formation in the sky exploded out with an even more powerful aura and gave off an even more intense light as a searing heat spread out. Massive sun god birds once again flew out from the magic formation and gave off cries as they flapped their wings and charged towards the Pantheon Palace, giving off a terrifying aura. Zhao Fu's eyes lit up as he looked at the sun god bird. At that moment, the countless Pantheon Palace's soldiers grabbed at the air, and the platinum-colored aura around their bodies condensed into 3-meter-long platinum-colored spears, which they vigorously swung out. Swish, swish, swish. The platinum-colored spears gave off waves of energy as they shot out incredibly quickly towards the sun god birds, leaving behind rays of platinum-colored light. There were simply too many of them to count. Bang, bang, bang. The countless sun god birds were pierced by the platinum-colored spears and exploded, causing sparks to fly everywhere and creating a rain of fire. The scene was quite beautiful. Boom! A massive explosion once again sounded out as countless traces of platinum-colored aura gathered, forming a 10,000-meter-long spear. It gave off an extremely terrifying power and seemed to cause the space around it to tremble. Bang! The massive spear gave off destructive power as it shot towards the magic formation in the sky, resulting in a massive explosion. It was incredibly fast and left behind a massive platinum-colored ray of light. The magic formation in the sky sensed the danger, and massive sun god birds flew out, giving off powerful auras as they flew towards the spear, wanting to stop it. Bang! 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 Countless sun god birds that flew over were pierced by the terrifying power of the spear, causing explosions and sparks to fly everywhere. Bang! The spear was like a hot knife through butter as it pierced through countless sun god birds and gave off shocking power as it slammed into the magic formation and pierced through it. Cracks appeared on the magic formation before turning into motes of light and dissipating. This scene caused the expressions of the Sun Alliance's countless people to become quite unsightly. Their most powerful attack had been destroyed by the Pantheon Palace. Kill! The 10,000 god army gave off terrifying auras as they ferociously flooded towards the defensive wall. Chapter 1945. Boom! Countless runes and restrictions spread out from the defensive walls, forming rectangular shields that were golden and gave off faint light. They blocked in front of the defensive walls and gave off an indestructible aura. In order to stop the 10,000 Gods Alliance, the Sun God Palace had made many preparations. Facing the shields, the countless Pantheon soldiers gave off boundless platinum auras, which quickly condensed. Swish, 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 platinum chains containing terrifying force shot toward the defensive walls incredibly quickly, and in the blink of an eye, they hit the shields. Bang! 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 Massive sounds rang out as the platinum chains within the golden shield shattered, turning into motes of light and dissipating. Swish! 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 The Pantheon army grasped this opportunity and shot out arrows. The countless arrows gave off immense power as they flew out, causing people to feel fear. Following this, countless arrows poured down like a torrential rain. Arg! Pained cries sounded out as some Sun God Palace soldiers could not react in time, and their bodies were pierced by arrows. Blood flew everywhere as cries continuously sounded out. Some Pantheon soldiers swung their weapons to deflect the incoming arrows, while others used their shields to block the incoming arrows. The Pantheon army continued to rush up the defensive walls and quickly reached the bottom of the defensive walls. They took out ladders, flying chains, or directly climbed up the defensive walls and started to attack the defensive walls. The Sun God Palace army started to counterattack, using bows and arrows to shoot at the Pantheon army and using heavy objects to smash the Pantheon soldiers. They also slashed out cold lights and attacked the Pantheon army. Arg! Pain cries sounded out as the Sun God Palace army attacked. The Pantheon soldiers were still injured or killed, but their attacks were still incredibly ferocious, and they continued to attack the Sun God Palace army. The scene was incredibly chaotic, and the battle was incredibly intense, and the sounds of battle could be heard in all directions. Clang, clang, clang. Suddenly, 10 or so soldiers gathered their power, forming white chains that gave off immense power as they shot towards the defensive walls. Some Sun God Palace soldiers could not react in time, and their bodies were pierced by the chains. These chains were a special ability that the Pantheon army had. After a long period of training, they were very proficient in using this ability. Moreover, these chains were condensed from the power of 10,000 gods, which could restrain other divine soldiers. If ordinary divine soldiers were careless, they could very well die at the hands of these chains. Making use of this sudden attack and their advantage in numbers, the army of 10,000 deities successfully attacked the city walls and began to fight head-on with the Sun God army. A solar soldier stabbed out with his spear, piercing through the body of 10,000 god soldier who had just climbed up the city wall. Another 10,000 god soldier rushed up the city wall and with a swing of his saber, killed a solar soldier. A 10,000 god soldier held a bow and shot out an arrow, piercing through a sun soldier's body. Another sun soldier held a sharp sword and vigorously slashed out, sending a 10,000 god soldier flying. A myriad god soldier kicked a sun soldier flying before charging over and chopping off his head. A sun soldier brandished his axe and sent a myriad god soldier flying. Zhao Fu looked at the intense battle below and turned to look at the godly spirits. Now that the soldiers were tied down, it was time to attack the godly spirits. Attack! Zhao Fu held the Emperor Killing Sword and gave off a powerful aura, as he was the first to rush over. The other godly spirits obeyed Zhao Fu's orders and also gave off powerful auras as they rushed over. On the Sun God Army's side, the godly spirits' expressions were quite unsightly, but they had no choice but to go up. Zhao Fu rushed in front of the three sun gods and sent a wave of power into his sword, causing it to give off a powerful sword energy. He vigorously slashed out, sending out a massive sword light towards the three godly spirits. The three sun gods took out their weapons and sent divine power into them, sending out three golden rays of light that gave off terrifying power as they slashed toward Zhao Fu. Bang! The two attacks collided, resulting in an explosion. Cold light shot everywhere, and a powerful shockwave spread out. Zhao Fu stood his ground and did not move at all. The three sun gods were sent flying back 5 or 6 meters. They looked at Zhao Fu with unsightly expressions. This Pantheon God Lord was quite terrifying and was much stronger than the three of them. Zhao Fu coldly laughed and rushed towards the male godly spirit. He quickly arrived in front of him, and his sword gave off shocking power as it slashed out. The male sun god roared and held a golden saber as he slashed out with his full strength. Shing! The saber and sword collided, resulting in the sound of metal intersecting and sparks flying everywhere. The male sun god only managed to block Zhao Fu's attack, and Zhao Fu swung his sword, sending the male sun god flying back. The two female sun gods held their weapons and rushed over from Zhao Fu's left and right. They vigorously slashed out with their swords, sending out a massive golden sword light that gave off a searing heat as it slashed toward Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu did not move, and a black dragon inscription barrier giving off a powerful aura spread out. Bang! The two golden sword lights slashed against the barrier, resulting in a massive explosion. A heat wave spread out and many cracks appeared on the barrier. Boom! A massive explosion sounded out as the male godly spirit exploded out with all of his power, and his body gave off an intense golden light. The male godly spirit raised his saber and sent a powerful golden energy into it, causing the saber to give off terrifying power. A 1,000-meter tall golden saber image appeared, giving off a massive and powerful aura. Boom! The male godly spirit vigorously slashed down, and the 1,000-meter tall golden saber image gave off a power that seemed to be able to slash apart everything as it slashed toward Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu looked slightly disdainful as he raised his sword and lightly cried out, "Sword owner!" Shing! A massive wave of sword chi flowed out of the sword, forming an enormous sword chi storm that swept out. Zhao Fu vigorously slashed out, and an extremely sharp sword light containing massive sword chi slashed towards the male godly spirit. Bang! The golden saber image was slashed apart and turned into countless shards that shot everywhere. The male godly spirit was hit by a massive force and coughed up a large mouthful of blood as he flew back 100 meters. Zhao Fu coldly laughed as he said, "You're not a match for me. Either submit or die." A female godly spirit coldly said, "Is that so? We know that you're powerful, but as long as we can stall you, we'll definitely win." Hearing this, Zhao Fu's expression slightly fell. Chapter 1946. That was to have others attack Pantheon. There was only one faction that had the ability to attack Pantheon, which was the Night Goddess Alliance that had signed a contract with Zhao Fu. Back at the Night God Alliance, Yilin gave a trace of a smile as she asked, "How is the battle between the Sun Alliance and Pantheon going?" A young man next to her laughed as he said, "Pantheon's army and God Lord have been tied up by the Sun Alliance and can't retreat at all. This is our best opportunity to act." The big man standing by the side loudly laughed as he said, "Haha, this time we'll definitely destroy Pantheon and get rid of this threat." An elderly man stroked his beard and laughed as he said, "Did Pantheon's God Lord really think that we would sign a contract with him and not participate in their battle? Did he really think that we were that stupid? What a joke. An ordinary-looking woman next to him laughed as she said, "That's right. I feel that he's quite stupid. I think he's really stupid." After signing the contract with us, he immediately attacked the Sun Alliance. He really trusts us. A young man in white said, "Let's not waste any more time and attack Pantheon. Pantheon is like a juicy piece of meat. We need to properly enjoy it." Beside him, the Night God Alliance lightly laughed as she said, "That's right. Let's hurry up and destroy Pantheon as soon as possible. After devouring their faction and not leaving anything for the Sun Alliance, we'll be the largest faction here." Everyone smiled and nodded. The people from the Night Goddess Alliance and the Sun Goddess Alliance had already agreed to work together to lure Pantheon into taking the bait so that they could destroy Pantheon. Indeed, this method did not involve allying with the Sun Alliance. They had great advantages in all sorts of situations, and they could also eliminate the Sun Alliance's greatest threat. Everyone in the Night Goddess Alliance approved of this method, and their opinions were rarely unanimous. If this was not their goal, they would not have signed a contract with Pantheon. They understood the threat that Pantheon posed, so they could not just allow Pantheon to devour the Sun Alliance. If that happened, they would not be able to escape death. At that moment, Yilin took out an azure jade orb that was as big as a fist and sent a wave of godly spirit into it, causing runes to flash within it. The jade orb gave off light and floated up from Yilin's hand. It flew into the air and gave off an attractive force. Countless azure specks of light floated out of the godly spirits' bodies and fused into the azure jade stone. Since the Night Goddess Alliance had decided to plot against Pantheon, they naturally had a way to dissolve the contract they had signed with Pantheon. This blue jade stone was the method to dissolve the contract. Now that the contract was over, the Night Goddess Alliance gave the order to attack, and the armies had been waiting for a long time. Boom! The army gave off a terrifying aura as they flooded forwards. They moved incredibly quickly and soon arrived outside the Pantheon Palace's defensive walls. By now, 40 million soldiers had gathered on the city walls. Originally, Zhao Fu had 50 million soldiers defending the Pantheon Temple, but the other directions also needed to be defended, so only 40 million soldiers were gathered here. Meanwhile, the Night Goddess Alliance's military strength had already reached 300 million. This time, they had also launched an all-out attack with the goal of annihilating the Pantheon Palace, not giving them a chance to catch their breath. The godly spirits of the Night Goddess Alliance looked at the 40 million soldiers on the city wall. This time, without any surprises, they would definitely win. A big man stood on the city wall and recklessly laughed as he said, "Your Pantheon Palace is going to perish. Don't resist at all and submit to us as soon as possible." The goddess of iron and stone led the remaining godly spirits to stand on the city wall and coldly harumphed. "You can try. Our Pantheon Palace isn't something that you can destroy." The big man gave a disdainful smile and was about to continue speaking when Yilin said with a cold expression, "Don't waste time. It's best to destroy them as soon as possible." The others nodded and gave the order to attack. "Kill!" The Night Goddess Alliance army loudly roared and gave off a powerful aura as they flooded towards the Pantheon Palace's defensive walls, giving off an incredibly ferocious aura. On the other side, the goddess of iron and stone gave the order to attack. Swish, 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 arrows containing immense power shot out from the defensive walls towards the Night Goddess Alliance. All of the Night Goddess Alliance soldiers exploded out with power and gave off a black aura. This black aura gathered in the air and formed a massive black energy barrier that gave off a powerful aura. The arrows hit the barrier and were deflected. Not only were they unable to harm the Night Goddess Alliance soldiers, but the barrier did not crack either. The Night Goddess Alliance army gave off ferocious auras and continued to charge towards the Pantheon Palace. Boom! A massive and holy aura exploded out as a platinum-colored magic formation appeared on the ground. Heaven and earth power continuously gathered as a massive platinum-colored energy barrier appeared, giving off an indestructible aura. Seeing this, the Night Goddess Alliance's godly spirits gave the order to dispel the barrier, and powerful auras gathered, forming massive creatures. There were lions, humans, tigers, massive hammers, and other creatures that floated in the air and gave off powerful auras. They formed powerful gales that spread out, making people feel quite afraid. Bang! 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 Countless soldiers controlled the massive creatures, and they gave off terrifying power as they charged at the platinum-colored barrier. They continuously smashed against the barrier, resulting in massive sounds as cracks started to appear on the barrier. The Pantheon Palace also condensed massive creatures that charged at the Night Goddess Alliance army, but there were too few of them, and they were completely suppressed by the Night Goddess Alliance army. Bang! A while later, a massive explosion sounded out as the platinum-colored barrier was shattered by the countless massive creatures. The Night Goddess Alliance's godly spirits were delighted, and the soldiers immediately attacked, taking down the defensive walls as quickly as possible. Kill! The countless soldiers received the order and roared excitedly, giving off ferocious auras as they charged at the Pantheon Palace's defensive walls. Now that the barrier had been shattered, as long as the 300 million soldiers reached the defensive walls, they would be able to easily take down the defensive walls. When that time came, they would be able to charge into the Pantheon Palace and conquer the entire region. Suddenly, the Night Goddess Alliance's godly spirits saw white-robed figures giving off holy auras appear on the defensive walls. They looked up at the heavens and clasped their hands together as they opened their mouths and gave off an incredibly beautiful and dreamlike song. It was not a voice that could be heard in the mortal world, and it contained a formless magic power. Chapter 1947. What's going on? The godly spirits looked at the soldiers falling in droves and could not understand what was going on. However, as the beautiful song sounded out, they felt quite sleepy and understood what was going on, so they quickly ordered the soldiers to retreat. Seeing this strange scene, countless night god soldiers looked quite fearful as they continuously retreated. However, even though they had retreated, there were still many people lying on the ground. There were roughly 40 to 50 million of them, and this was a heavy blow to the Night God Alliance. Now, the Night God Alliance's people understood that it was the priests singing that had caused countless soldiers to fall asleep. Moreover, this power was incredibly powerful and was not only effective on soldiers, but also on godly spirits. Seeing the countless soldiers fall, the Night God Alliance's people's expressions became quite grim. They had thought that they could take this opportunity to destroy Pantheon, but they had never thought that this would be the result. That singing power was simply too terrifying. Pantheon had hidden it quite well. They had such a terrifying ability, but had not used it yet, and had only used it now. What do we do now? The godly spirits looked at each other. Pantheon's army could return at any moment, so they had to destroy Pantheon as soon as possible. However, now that Pantheon had this ability, how should they deal with it? A young godly said coldly, "Those songs were made by those priests. As long as we kill those priests, it will be fine." An elderly man next to him frowned and said, "It's not that simple. There are 30 or so godly spirits on the other side. Do you think they'll just stand there and watch as we kill those priests?" The woman standing next to him said somewhat anxiously, "Pantheon might already know what we're doing, and we don't know if the Sun Alliance has the ability to hold them back. If Pantheon rushes back and attacks from both sides, we might suffer heavy casualties." A middle-aged man wearing robes said in agreement, "That's right. We need to quickly find a way to deal with this and destroy Pantheon as soon as possible. Otherwise, if they come back and find out that we've broken the contract and attack them, Pantheon will definitely take revenge on us." Yilin looked ahead with a serious expression and understood how urgent the situation was. Things were not as simple as they had thought. Suddenly, a night god lightly laughed as he said, "Those priests used their singing to make countless people fall asleep. Won't we be fine if we can't hear them?" Hearing this, The godly spirits looked delighted and immediately had their soldiers use their power to block out all sound before once again attacking. The night god soldiers obeyed and used their power to block out all sound before once again launching an attack on the Pantheon Palace with a massive aura. Some of the godly spirits had smiles on their faces, believing that they would be able to destroy the Pantheon Palace this time. Some of the godly spirits looked quite worried that this method would not work, as it felt too simple. Seeing those people once again flood out, the goddess of iron and stone stood on the city walls and used her arrows to attack. When those people came closer, she ordered the 20,000 priestesses to once again sing a holy song. Priests dressed in pure white robes and giving off holy auras placed their palms together and looked up at the sky with pious expressions. They opened their mouths and began to sing beautiful songs that sounded like dreams and illusions, like the music of the heavens. It was not something that could exist in a mortal world. Hearing this voice, many of the soldiers felt their consciousness fade. Their vision darkened and they fell to the ground. The godly spirits felt quite startled and hurriedly ordered their soldiers to retreat. Their expressions were quite unsightly. Wasn't his hearing sealed now? Why were countless soldiers still fainting? The Night God Alliance's godly spirits could not understand why, and they felt that they had underestimated the Pantheon Palace. However, luckily, some of the godly spirits had expected this, so they did not launch an all-out attack. As such, they suffered fewer losses this time. Now, the Night God Alliance's godly spirits felt quite troubled. Even blocking their hearing was useless, and they could not think of a way to deal with this. This was the powerful power of the Pantheon hymn. Its power was sound, and the ability to make people drowsy was not only effective by hearing it, but also by spreading out the sound waves. Those who were in it would be affected by the sound waves and fall into a deep sleep. Yi Lin said seriously, "Now, we can only go up and see if we can deal with those priestesses." They had 40 or so godly spirits on their side, so they had an advantage in numbers. Moreover, as godly spirits, they had more power and might be able to resist the holy song's power. Apart from them, there was nothing else they could do, so they nodded in support of this suggestion. They first had their soldiers tie down the Pantheon Palace's soldiers in the distance, while the Night God Alliance's godly spirits exploded out with immense power and gave off boundless divine light as they rushed towards the defensive walls. The metal goddess gave a trace of a cold smile as the 30 or so godly spirits behind her stood together and exploded out with power. Boundless platinum-colored light shined out as a massive platinum-colored magic formation appeared on the ground. After the platinum-colored magic formation appeared, the surrounding spirit energy continuously flowed into it, and the magic formation gave off an intense platinum-colored light that gave off a holy and dignified aura. Facing the Night God Alliance's godly spirits charging over, the godly spirits all stretched out a hand. Clang, 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 platinum-colored chains that were as thick as arms shot out, giving off immense power. There were countless of them, and they shot incredibly quickly towards the Night God Alliance's godly spirits. Yi Lin and the other godly spirits' expressions fell, and they swung their weapons, sending out cold lights that cut apart the incoming chains. However, more and more chains shot out, and they became more and more ferocious, forcing the Night God Alliance's godly spirits to retreat. There were even 3 or 4 godly spirits who were caught off guard and were directly bound by the chains before being dragged back to the defensive walls. Even more chains shot out, binding their bodies. No matter how much they exploded out with their powerful divinity power, they were unable to break free from the chains, and they could only look at the other godly spirits in terror. However, the godly spirits had all retreated far away, and they still looked quite afraid. If they did not react in time, they would have been caught by the chains. They naturally would not go up to save the godly spirits that had been captured. By now, the situation had reached a stalemate. Pantheon focused on defense and naturally would not attack, and they were happy to stall for time. The Night God Alliance's people could not do anything to Pantheon, so if they rashly attacked, they would suffer great losses. Chapter 1948. Zhao Fu's gaze turned to another battlefield. After hearing that the Night God Alliance had canceled the contract and were attacking Pantheon, even though Zhao Fu was quite angry, he did not panic. This was because Zhao Fu did not completely trust the Night God Alliance. He had felt quite confused as to why they had taken the initiative to sign the contract, so he had held back in case anything unexpected happened. In the end, this was what had happened. Zhao Fu believed that the Pantheon God Palace would be able to defend against the Night God Alliance, so he did not panic. Right now, the most important thing was not to retreat, but to quickly destroy the Sun God Alliance. That way, only the Night God Alliance would be left, and Pantheon would definitely win. Zhao Fu held a sword and vigorously slashed out, sending the two Sun Gods flying as he called out, "Attack the Sun Alliance with all your might." After receiving Zhao Fu's orders, the soldiers and godly spirits attacked the Sun God Alliance even more ferociously, and the battle became more and more intense. Blood continuously flew everywhere as cries continuously sounded out. The Sun Goddess, who had been talking to Zhao Fu, looked quite confused. She had said those words to make Zhao Fu panic, so that Pantheon's army would quickly retreat. All they had to do was stall Pantheon. That way, the Sun God Alliance will be able to reduce the pressure and losses on the Sun God Alliance. Moreover, they did not want to risk their lives and give all the benefits to the Night God Alliance. As such, they wanted to let some of Pantheon's soldiers return so that they could fight and wear each other down. That way, the Sun God Alliance would be able to take this opportunity to attack Pantheon and obtain great benefits. However, the outcome was completely different to what she had expected. Zhao Fu did not show any signs of retreating, and he instead ordered all of his soldiers to attack. Clang, 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 as the Sun Goddess thought to herself. Zhao Fu waved his hand and countless chains shot out, binding the other Sun Goddess in the air. She quickly reacted and rushed over with her sword, but she was once again slashed to the ground by Zhao Fu. Her body smashed into the ground, opening up a large crater. She coughed up a mouthful of blood, and her aura became weaker. Ark, the male Sun God spirit once again roared as his body gave off an intense God light, and a terrifying aura spread out. The male Sun God's body continuously grew until he became a 1,000-meter tall giant, giving off golden light. He gave off an incredibly searing aura, causing the space around him to twist. He held a massive golden saber and vigorously slashed out, sending out a terrifying golden saber light that seemed to be able to cleave apart the world as it slashed toward Zhao Fu, giving off terrifying sounds. A trace of killing intent appeared in Zhao Fu's eyes as a massive wave of black divine power flowed out of his body. His body gave off an intense demonic light as a 1,000-meter wide image appeared behind Zhao Fu. This image was Zhao Fu's image. He wore a black cloak, and his gaze was quite terrifying. He gave off an extremely terrifying aura, and a powerful wind blew, causing the clouds and the surroundings to change. Zhao Fu gripped the sword in his hand and swung it forcefully. The illusory figure stretched out his hand and grabbed. Countless demonic lights gathered, and a sword appeared in his hand. Then he waved it forcefully. Boom! A massive black crescent containing terrifying power flew out, tearing apart spatial cracks as it flew towards a male sun god at an extremely fast speed. Bang! The black crescent and golden saber light collided, resulting in an enormous explosion. The golden saber light was slashed apart by the black crescent, turning into countless tiny saber lights that shot out in all directions. The 1,000-meter tall sun god spirit was also sent flying back. The sun god spirit flew back hundreds of meters, and a gash appeared on his chest, from which blood flowed out. Zhao Fu brought with him the 1,000-meter tall illusory figure and gave off a shocking aura as he rushed in front of the sun god spirit. Zhao Fu raised his sword, and the illusory figure raised his sword as a massive wave of power flowed into it, causing a massive sword wind to sweep out. Boom! Zhao Fu's sword slashed down, giving off destructive power as it slashed towards the sun god spirit. It seemed to be able to split apart everything, and a berserk sword wind blasted out. The sun god spirit was given a big fright and immediately used his saber to block in front of him, sending a wave of power into his saber. Bang! As the terrifying sword slashed down, the saber in front of the sun god spirit was slashed apart, and the sun god spirit's body was split in half. Countless golden motes of light dissipated, and the male godly spirit's body powerlessly fell to the ground, no longer breathing. Seeing that the male sun god spirit had been killed, the remaining sun goddess looked incredibly hateful as she gave off an aura and rushed at Zhao Fu. Zhao Fu grabbed out with a hand, and the 1,000-meter-tall illusory figure also stretched out a hand, giving off a massive wave of power as it grabbed the sun goddess. The sun goddess vigorously struggled, and her body gave off an intense divine light. Zhao Fu coldly harumphed, and a massive wave of evil demonic chi flowed into the sun goddess body. The sun goddess resistance gradually weakened, and she was controlled by Zhao Fu. The Sun Alliance had been unable to stop the Pantheon Palace's army, and now that the sun god spirit had been captured by Zhao Fu, the other godly spirits were either dead or injured. The defeat was set in stone. As Zhao Fu continuously killed godly spirits, the Pantheon Palace's army continuously attacked the Sun Alliance's army. The Sun Alliance's army started to crumble, and countless soldiers retreated. They understood that they had lost. Zhao Fu did not waste any time and led his army into the Sun Alliance's army, quickly conquering region after region and killing anyone who resisted. Zhao Fu then turned to another battlefield. Yi Lin and the other godly spirits thought of a method, which was to create all sorts of terrifying objects to attack the Pantheon Palace. These objects were only condensed objects and were not corporeal, so they would not be affected by the song. However, after trying, they found that the difference between them and the condensed objects was too great, and their control over the condensed objects was greatly reduced. The Pantheon Palace's soldiers were able to easily destroy the condensed objects, so the condensed objects were not damaged at all. As such, the Night Goddess Alliance could only stop and think of other methods. At that moment, a soldier ran over in panic and terror, reporting to Godly Spirit. The Sun Alliance has been taken down by the Pantheon Palace and is currently returning. Hearing this, everyone present was given a big fright. They had never thought that the Pantheon Palace would be destroyed so quickly. They had not even broken through the Pantheon Palace's defenses, let alone destroyed them. Everyone's expressions were quite unsightly, and they could only give the order to quickly retreat. If the Pantheon Palace's soldiers retreated, they would not be able to escape. Moreover, even if they ran back now, they would not feel any less afraid. After all, they were the only alliance left here. How would they defend against the terrifying Pantheon Palace? Chapter 1949. After Zhao Fu took over the Sun Alliance as fast as he could, he left some soldiers to control the Sun Alliance and immediately returned to Pantheon with his soldiers. Arriving at another battlefield, the Night God Alliance's army had long since retreated. On the ground, the 1,000 God soldiers were tying up the unconscious Night God soldiers. The Night God soldiers did not react at all. They were like corpses. If they wanted to wake up, without the help of the Pantheon priest, it would take at least a week. The goddess of iron and stone walked over with a smile. This time, I led the soldiers and the gods to successfully stop the Night Goddess Alliance, and we didn't suffer many losses. How are you going to reward me? This time, Zhao Fu had not expected the Night Goddess Alliance to abort the contract and launch an all-out attack on Pantheon. The goddess of iron and stone led the soldiers and priests to resist the attack, which was a great contribution. Zhao Fu chuckled. I'll give you whatever you want. I'll reward you later. The goddess of iron and stone revealed a happy smile. Then how's the situation on your side, husband? Are there any accidents? Zhao Fu smiled as he said, "Everything is as expected. The Sun Alliance is now under the Pantheon Palace's control, and they have subdued many soldiers and resources. Most of the godly spirits have either been captured or killed." The Ironstone goddess felt delighted. Now that Pantheon had devoured 3 major alliances, its strength had become even more terrifying. Even though there was still the Night Goddess Alliance left, it would be destroyed sooner or later. When that time came, Pantheon would be the largest faction here. As the gods of the Pantheon, their statuses and powers would also increase. Zhao Fu looked at the bound Night God soldiers and asked, "What's the situation on your side?" The goddess of iron and stone replied with a smile, "We didn't suffer any losses on our side, and we even captured a few godly spirits and 40 million Night God soldiers. What do you plan to do with them, husband?" Zhao Fu thought for a moment before saying, "After the situation stabilizes, I'll attack the Night Goddess Alliance. Lock up these soldiers and godly spirits for now, and after taking down the Night Goddess Alliance, we'll see if they surrender or not before dealing with them." The goddess of iron and stone smiled and nodded. Seeing that there was nothing here, Zhao Fu returned to the Sun Alliance. There was still some small-scale resistance, and the commoners were still in a state of panic. They needed Zhao Fu to stabilize the situation. After coming to the Sun God Palace, Zhao Fu gave many orders for the soldiers to destroy the small factions as quickly as possible. He also had the many godly spirits personally lead troops to kill the resistance and hang their corpses at the commoners' city to the commoners. He also had countless soldiers enter the city to maintain order and appointed some former officials to appease the commoners to calm them. In the end, he had people bring some people up. These were all godly spirits that had been captured. There were more than 20 of them, and they were all tied up with iron chains. The Sun Holy Daughter gave a beautiful smile and bowed as she said, "Congratulations, God Lord, for destroying the Sun Alliance." Zhao Fu smiled and nodded. He took out a golden crystal and tossed it over as he said, "This is the Sun God's divinity, and it's very compatible with your attributes. Back then, I promised to make you a godly spirit, and now I'll fulfill my promise." The Sun God Palace's goddess gave a delighted smile as she received the Sun God divinity and said gratefully, "Thank you, God Lord." This proved that her choice back then had been correct. The Sun Alliance had been destroyed by the Pantheon Palace, and she had obtained the Sun God divinity. As long as she fused it into her body, she would become the new Sun God. All of this was because of Zhao Fu. Without Zhao Fu, this would have been impossible. Just what kind of person was Zhao Fu? The Sun God Palace could not help but feel admiration toward Zhao Fu. She understood who this Sun God divinity came from and felt quite disappointed. He had once been a godly spirit that she had believed in. The Sun Goddess next to her was called Sun Han, and she looked furious as she said, "Sun Lan, you actually betrayed us despite being the Sun God Palace's goddess." Another Sun Goddess, Sun Lu, said somewhat angrily, "Back then, we chose you to be the Sun God Palace's goddess and gave you a prestigious status and treatment. We did not mistreat you, so how can you face us?" Sun Lan, the Sun God Palace's goddess, felt quite guilty because the Sun God spirit had treated her quite well and valued her greatly. However, even though she had betrayed the Sun God spirit, she had only provided some information and had not been very useful. The Sun Alliance would still fall at the Pantheon Palace's hands. This was already destined that the Sun Alliance would not be a match for the Pantheon Palace. Now that the Pantheon Palace had taken control of the Sun Alliance, she was about to become a godly spirit. Even though she felt quite guilty, she understood the current situation. Sun Lan looked at the two Sun Goddesses and lightly laughed as she said, "Lord godly spirits, I advise you to submit to the Sun God Lord as soon as possible. I advise you to submit to the Divine Master as soon as possible. Otherwise, you will suffer. The Divine Master has special methods to deal with you." Zhao Fu also gave a trace of a smile as he looked at the 20 or so godly spirits below and said, "Now that your factions have been destroyed by me, you have no choice but to submit to me." The godly spirits looked at each other, and an elderly man knelt on the ground and said, "I'm willing to submit to the sun god Lord and become a godly spirit of the Pantheon Palace." He had no other choice. He could either submit or die. Even though he was old, he did not want to die. With him taking the lead, some other godly spirits also chose to submit to the Pantheon Palace. In the end, there were 8 godly spirits, 5 men and 3 women. They were still not willing to submit to the Pantheon Palace, and the 2 sun goddesses were among them. Zhao Fu did not say anything and stretched out a hand. A wave of power flowed out, turning into countless blood-red arcs of lightning that hit the godly spirits' bodies. The immense pain caused the 8 godly spirits to fall to the ground and howl. Their bodies continuously twitched. Seeing those people's pitiful states, the godly spirits who had just submitted could not help but feel even more fearful of Zhao Fu. Among the 8 godly spirits, there was a slim and good-looking woman wearing a red dress. She was the first to give in and beg Zhao Fu for mercy. As such, Zhao Fu did not continue to torture her and continued to give out arcs of lightning, attacking the other godly spirits. Crackling sounds rang out continuously, and lightning flashed incessantly. Howls continuously sounded out, and 3 more godly spirits were willing to submit. They were all men, and in the end, there were 2 men and 2 goddesses who were not willing to submit. Zhao Fu was not interested in continuing to torture them, and he waved his hand and sent out a wave of power to chop off the heads of the 2 male godly spirits. Large amounts of blood spurted out and sprayed everywhere, and the stench of blood spread out. Chapter 1950. The 2 other sun goddesses lay on the ground, looking quite wretched. Their faces were quite pale as they looked at the 2 godly spirits that had been beheaded. Blood had splattered everywhere, and some of it had even splashed onto their bodies. They could clearly feel the warm blood turn cold. Sitting above, Zhao Fu grabbed out, and a formless energy spread out as the 2 godhoods floated out of the corpses and flew into Zhao Fu's hand. Zhao Fu put the 2 godhoods away and looked at the trembling people below as he said, "You can all leave for now." The godly spirits let out a sigh of relief and immediately left. This was the first time they had felt so afraid of someone. Zhao Fu's gaze fell on the 2 sun goddesses, and he gave a trace of a smile. Taiyang Han sensed something and said with a cold expression, "What do you want to do to us?" Beside him, Taiyang Lan understood what Zhao Fu meant and lightly laughed as she said, "I told you that the God Lord has special methods to deal with you. It's best to submit to the God Lord as soon as possible, or else it'll be quite difficult for you." Taiyang Han angrily cried out, "It's best if you kill us as soon as possible. We won't submit to you. Don't waste your time." Taiyang Lan looked at Zhao Fu with her beautiful eyes and said coldly, "If you don't kill us now, you'll definitely regret it in the future. I swear that I'll destroy the Pantheon Temple." Zhao Fu lightly laughed and waved his hand, releasing the chains binding the 2 goddesses. The 2 sun goddesses did not understand why Zhao Fu had released them. However, a few chains quickly shot out from the void and bound the 2 goddesses' hands and feet. Then, they pulled them into the air and pulled their hands and feet apart to form the Chinese character. Zhao Fu waved his hand, and a wave of energy tore off the 2 goddesses' clothes, revealing their bodies to Zhao Fu. He pressed down with his hand, and a massive wave of 6 desires' demonic qi flowed into their bodies. The 2 goddesses' faces immediately became red, and sensing their bodies' reactions, Taiyang Han angrily cried out, "You bastard! Hurry up and kill us!" Zhao Fu sat on his chair and gave a trace of a smile as he looked at the 2 goddesses and ignored their words. Taiyang Lan said with a smile, "Divine Lord, I'll help you train them and make them submit to you as soon as possible." "Yes," Zhao Fu replied with a smile. Taiyang Lan stepped forward and began to do all kinds of indescribable things. The 2 goddesses were so ashamed that they wanted to die, but in the end, they still sank into it. Their voices kept ringing in the hall. Zhao Fu turned his gaze back to the documents in front of him. Even though some of the Sun Alliance's population had escaped, the Pantheon Palace had still gained 3 billion people. The Sun Alliance was very powerful, much more powerful than the other two alliances. Now that the Pantheon Temple had swallowed 3 alliances, its total population had almost reached 10 billion. In addition to the population, there were also more than 100 million Sun soldiers who had submitted to the Pantheon. Zhao Fu did not use them now and had them scattered in several places. If these soldiers stayed together with the commoners, it would be easy for them to rebel, so Zhao Fu did not use them. Instead, he split them up to prevent them from suddenly rebelling, as that would be very dangerous. There was also the situation in the various regions of the Sun Alliance, as well as the various factions. The factions that had not submitted had either been destroyed or had escaped. The remaining factions had all submitted to the Pantheon Palace, so these people were quite dangerous. Zhao Fu sent people to keep an eye on them and wait for the situation to stabilize. An hour or so later, the 2 sun goddesses had lost their minds and continuously twisted in the air, making lewd sounds. Taiyang Lan took out a handkerchief and wiped her hands as she smiled and said to Zhao Fu, "Divine Lord, it's fine now. They won't rebel against you." Zhao Fu lightly laughed and released the chains binding the 2 sun goddesses. The 2 women landed on the ground and leapt into Zhao Fu's embrace, tearing at Zhao Fu's clothes. However, Zhao Fu casually sealed the 6 desires' demonic qi within their bodies. By now, the 2 sun goddesses had returned to normal, and they powerlessly leaned against Zhao Fu's body with red faces. Taiyang Han and Taiyang Lu did not know what to say. They had clearly been unwilling to submit to Zhao Fu, but now they had submitted to Zhao Fu. Moreover, their bodies and souls wanted to be loved by that bastard Zhao Fu. They did not want to admit this, but it was the truth. Zhao Fu smiled as he looked at Taiyang Lu, who was in his embrace, and said, "You seem to have sworn to destroy the Pantheon Palace. How do you feel now?" Taiyang Lu turned his face to the side in shame and was not willing to answer Zhao Fu's words. Taiyang Han looked at Zhao Fu with her beautiful eyes and harumphed, "We're all yours, so don't bully us." Zhao Fu lightly laughed. Taiyang Lan smiled as she walked up and sat beside Zhao Fu, saying, "From now on, we're all Divine Lord's women. The 3 of us have to properly serve Divine Lord." The 2 sun goddesses blushed and were about to take off Zhao Fu's clothes. Zhao Fu smiled as he cut them off. "Don't be like this." Taiyang Han said somewhat angrily, "Why? Don't tell me you don't like us. We're still virgins and have never been touched by a man." Before Zhao Fu could speak, Taiyang Lan smiled as she explained, "Right now, the Divine Lord has some problems with his cultivation technique, such that he can't do it with women. I've never served Divine Lord before, otherwise, with Divine Lord's charm, I would have long since started serving him." The 2 sun goddesses felt quite disappointed. Taiyang Han looked at Zhao Fu with her beautiful eyes and said, "Just who are you? How can you have such terrifying power and abilities? You've established such a terrifying faction in such a short period of time. Even I admire you." Now, Zhao Fu's identity was something that countless people were curious about. This was because Zhao Fu's abilities were simply too terrifying. Moreover, he had become the noblest person in this place and had the greatest authority, unifying this region. This was not something that an ordinary person could do, and this made everyone feel even more curious. Zhao Fu smiled as he said, "I'll tell you in the future." Taiyang Han felt a trace of displeasure, but seeing that Zhao Fu was unwilling to tell her, there was nothing she could do, and she could only accept it. At that moment, Zhao Fu suddenly discovered that there was a power within the 2 sun goddesses' bodies that was attracting him. Zhao Fu placed his hand on the sun goddess abdomen, and a suction force came out, absorbing that power. Golden god power continuously flowed into Zhao Fu's body. This was the sun god's sun power. Zhao Fu's chest gave off light, and a Tai Chi diagram appeared. Zhao Fu looked quite startled as he looked at the Tai Chi diagram on his chest. This was the sun and moon devil seal that Xing Chen had used when he had created the devil world. In the end, it had fused into the Tai Chi stone and turned into the Tai Chi diagram. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.